This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate what if Kid Naruto merged with Aizen. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
I have to. He stumbled. He halted, leaned on one leg, and gasped in surprise as the searing pain tore through it, but he continued. The rule of the day was haste. I have to leave. On the left side of his cracked and dry lips was a huge gash. The flaky outer layers of blood had already begun to peel off as it dried around it. He appeared to have two more cuts, each quite a distance across his gaunt face. The young boy could tell that dusk was approaching because of the way the sun was gradually disappearing into the trees on Konohagakure's west side. Without adequate protection from the cold, the young boy shivered as the wind undoubtedly picked up. The villagers' least concern was making him feel at ease. They only wanted to leave him alone in between violent outbursts of rage so that he could recover sufficiently for another using his strange, cursed healing ability. Weary and melancholy, two adjectives that had nothing to do with a boy of his age, the young boy hobbled along. However, the village itself was in drunken ecstasy. October 10th was always a day of both great happiness and great sadness. The villagers expressed their happiness that the nine-tailed fox had been defeated and their sadness that it hadn't been killed because, they said, it should have been every chance they had. As long as he was putting a significant amount of distance between himself and his oppressors, Uzumaki Naruto didn't care where he was limping off to. But he didn't have to worry. Beating a young boy into submission, leaving him physically and mentally damaged, no longer held the same amusement that it had once offered the Leaf's commoners. After serving their beloved village, the men had swaggered off, feeling satisfied with their noble work and worthy of a few drinks. I must go too. He was unable to continue walking, so he stopped short. Taking a deep breath, he leaned over and gripped his right leg. With each step he took, it seemed to throb, and it only got worse. When it felt like 1,000 knives were making their way up his legs and into his weak thighs, he was unable to continue much longer, telling himself it didn't hurt. Right thigh muscle torn. At 10 years old, Uzumaki Naruto was accustomed to being physically harmed by his beloved villagers. The different cuts and bruises that ran across his pallor were so familiar to him that they no longer even hurt. The problem was that when his right leg was put under a lot of strain, it had mattered this time. He scowled as he looked up. 44 feet 44 is such a scary number, a sign that something would go wrong no matter what. But it was appropriate that this particular section of the village should be represented by that number. The forest of death. He gazed at the heavy steel netting between the thick undergrowth and himself. The Chunin exams, which were held once every 4 years, were held in the forest that was named after it. At other times, it was still off limits, ravaged by the intense survival struggles that occurred during each round of the competition meant to demonstrate the superiority of one village over another. They said the land needed to be healed. He ran his hand across the bars of the tall steel fence and walked along it. He went on for a while before abruptly stopping at one point. When he timidly prodded the fence, it bent slightly more than it should have, a weak point giving way just enough to produce the desired effect. Despite the pain, he smiled. He leaned over and punched the fence. Only then did it appear to break. Innocently, it flapped in and out. He crawled through, pushing the flap. It was a very little flap, designed for him, Naruto reasoned, on days like these, when the villagers were a little too happy and in the mood to punish something in their happiness. Wincing at the pain, he climbed to his feet and crawled in. He looked at the fence this time, but from the inside. When he turned around, he saw the vast, rather intimidating forest with its eerie, dark green aura. That's what anyone else would call it, anyway. Naruto Uzumaki just limped in. You worthless villagers, how do you respond to this? There was never a better feeling than being the village's beaten-down jerk. A jerk. A new word that was just added to his expanding list of colorful words. According to him, the villagers seemed to call him that quite openly when he was present, along with a host of other intriguing-sounding terms that he had not yet tried. Naruto, what a way to start the big day. Naruto sighed as he moved calmly through the thick undergrowth. He believed that this atmosphere and the rich, thick smell of the soil were more powerful than a cooling salve for a burning wound. Every time he had been shunned, he had yearned for this still, serene air, the quiet broken by the sound of the ever-so feeble breeze that inadvertently crept through the green foliage. It was a very rough natural path, and he walked for a while, turning here and there. The little boy with the blonde hair appeared to know where to go and how to get there, even though the darkness was beginning to grow. He finally arrived at his destination with a heavy sigh. A single location that is as spacious as a tiny room but incredibly cozy. This place was special. He quickly fell to the ground and felt himself strike a soft pillow. Like surface composed of moss and leaves on the bark. He could see the moon. a full, bright moon in all its glory, as it ascended by tilting his head obliquely. Ironically, he would find refuge in the same forest that foretold the villagers' doom. Peace at last. However, the tranquil moment was disrupted, and quite brutally so. Uzumaki Naruto let out an unusual squeak from his larynx. Don't get me wrong, Naruto never had much time to squeak, but there were times and situations that called for loud, startling squeaks like these. On such occasions, Naruto could plainly see the face of a man who was broken and bruised, physically no better than he was, but with his eyes open and his gaze clouded with interest. Holy fuck. Naruto Uzumaki saw the man's mouth open. His blood-stained lips also moved. He moved slightly, his mutilated body scattered across the brush. That's not a very nice thing to say, young man. The man's voice was the first thing Uzumaki Naruto heard. He had no idea how long this man had been lying here, unattended, and alone, nor how or why he had come to be here. None of that seemed to matter. When Naruto heard this man's voice, they just slipped into the back of his mind. The blonde Jinchuriki's lips slowly smiled, but he was unable to understand why he was amused. He only knew that very few people spoke to the blonde Jinchuriki in that tone, and the fact that he was being addressed in that way seemed to make him feel a kind of trivial happiness, an unexplainable sense of gratitude to this man for just speaking to him. They hate you too? Although Naruto was unsure of the reason behind his question, he felt a strange tingle run up his spine as he looked at this man's body slumped against the tree trunk in tired resignation, his brown hair slipping carelessly over his rather hollow face, which he thought had the makings of a certain gentlemanly charm, and his weary yet intrigued hazel-colored eyes. Naruto took note of two things after the fact. The man's wounded body was covered in a blood-stained haori, but more significantly, Naruto could see a stunning sword in the man's right hand. He was holding it in a soft, almost caressing manner, much like a lover holds the hand of his beloved. When Naruto saw that the man was not responding, he repeated, "They hate you too. The sun is blotted out by overcast skies, which always depresses people. Why don't we let the sun shine for a little while longer?" A slow, amiable smile tugged at the corners of his lifeless lips as he met the young boy's eyes directly. "Yes, young man, yes, they do hate me." He became even more amused at the boy's surprise as his eyes widened in surprise. He raised his hand slowly, forcing himself to do so despite the numbing pain, and gestured for the young boy to approach. "They do hate." He had no idea why, but the boy appeared to scoot closer to him. He was a man, after all, and the boy had never met him before. In addition, he was holding his katana in the same way that a drowning man would hold a piece of driftwood. It didn't seem to matter, though, because the boy kept getting closer. When the stranger held up his hand, Uzumaki Naruto felt as though time had stopped. He felt the man's rough fingers brush against the gash on his face, caressing the wound so stupidly inflicted on the naive youngster, and a strange feeling filled his stomach. For the first time in a very long time, Sasuke Aizen grinned broadly, and Uzumaki Naruto saw someone smile at him for the first time. "They do hate, and yet, in an attempt to absorb as much warmth as possible, Naruto pressed his shoulders together. No, not the kind of warmth that one longs for when the cold begins to permeate the skin. No, not that particular one. It's the warmth of recognition, the warmth that shines from the sun in one's solar plexus, when you realize that someone else is truly in the same vile, hopeless situation that you are. It gave him an unending sense of happiness. He wasn't by himself, and yet, shall we give them a reason, young man?" Hazel brown eyes met tired cerulean eyes. "Shall we give them a reason to hate us?" Over the hidden village of Konoha, a fresh dawn appeared. When the sun's first rays reached Sarutobi Hiruzen, he awoke and rubbed his eyes. He stood up painfully, swinging his legs over slowly. Over time, his rheumatism had only gotten worse, but there wasn't much that could be done. The great man was finally growing old. He moved slowly, as though he had lost the agility that had made him Hokage. When he got to the sink, he turned on the faucet. His hands felt the creased skin as he cleansed his face. Although he was no longer fit to lead the village, he was compelled to come out of retirement and resume his duties because there was no qualified successor. He made his ablutions and then proceeded to the window that looked out over the whole country of fire. In front of us was the verdant landscape. After the buildings were roughly encircled by the village wall, the forest shielded the village and kept it hidden, like a green carpet. As the third put his hat on his head, it became clear that this morning was unique. He noticed sad eyes staring back at him in the mirror. Today is Naruto's birthday. It was his 13th. Even though the blonde Jinchuriki had always been full of surprises, practical jokes, and general misbehavior, Hiruzen was taken aback by the remarkable transformation of his disciple's son on that fateful day 3 years ago. The young boy's azure eyes appeared to be burdened by all the worries of the world, as if he were a veteran of the Third Great Shinobi War who had witnessed the unimaginable. There were more changes to come. He was now exceedingly courteous and occasionally annoyingly friendly. Like water off a waxy fig leaf, the insults, humiliations, violence, and profanity that once caused the little boy great pain now just slid off him. Even the most vile and vicious taunts from the villagers were accepted with a polite nod. They became even more enraged as a result, and they quickly resorted to actual physical violence. Even so stoically, he endures the pain. Several times, Sarutobi had to go save the boy from the angry villagers, and he had discovered him near death, bruised and bleeding. Some wounds could not be healed, but the healing power that the Kyuubi had reluctantly given him helped. But Hiruzen discovered that there was one thing that constantly disturbed him. Uzumaki Naruto never twisted his face to show the obvious pain he was experiencing, even though his injuries made it clear that he must be in a lot of pain. The same smile, not one of disdain, not one of malevolence, not one of delight, not one of laughter, would always grace his scarred face and dance across his parched and bloody lips. Just a grin. And that grin. Hiruzen was always shaken to his core by that very smile. It seemed as though the troubled youngster had found a way to express himself and a solution to all of his issues, like a guardian who would always be there to support him. Moving slowly up the inner corridor's granite steps, the Sandaime headed for his top floor office. Some of the Uchiha had started accompanying the Jinchuriki everywhere he went, firmly but peacefully shielding him from hecklers and the occasional drunk. Despite Naruto's initial mild protests, they insisted on serving as his bodyguards. It's funny, Hiruzen thought, how the boy would be so well received by the always reclusive Uchiha. The boy was receiving round-the clock protection from the Konoha police force because, according to the Sharingan clan, he had received more than his share of beatings. Allow them to do as they like. Hiruzen had taken the Uchiha's claim at face value, disregarding Danzo's urgent warnings that this might be a plot to win Naruto over to their cause and stage a coup d'état in the near future, using the Kyuubi's power to support their efforts to overthrow the village's ruling class. Naturally, Hiruzen had denied all of this in order to maintain peace. The police force was established for this purpose. That day, he had told Danzo, "Who am I to stop them if they wish to keep Naruto safe?" Hiruzen had witnessed much more, but he simply allowed things to continue as they were. Keeping in mind the Shodai's insistence on teachings, he reflected, as the Hokage, "I am responsible for safeguarding the will of fire and ensuring peace in Konoha. I am prepared to make any decision, no matter how foolish, to preserve the status quo." He went into his office. It was simply furnished, just as the first and the second had kept it when they were living there. The clock on the wall was slowly ticking away when he looked at it. It was a precious heirloom that brought back memories of a more turbulent era, which Sarutobi hoped was long gone. "He's where? I believed I had requested that he arrive after sunrise." The arrival of the Jinchuriki was announced by a knock on the door. The Hokage thought wistfully, another thing has changed. He had never before knocked. Slowly, the door opened, and Uzumaki Naruto entered. When Hiruzen saw his face, he became extremely disturbed. Why that face? Because the perpetually smiling face had a sense of gloom ingrained in it, akin to a warrior who had been mortally wounded and was relishing his final moments after embracing death's grim embrace. Even in the most desperate moments of the Shinobi Wars, he had never seen a 13-year-old make that face. The third was deeply offended by the courteous manner and the submissive, almost docile attitude. It seemed as though Hiruzen had let his beloved son become, well, this, and had once again broken his promise to his disciple on that fateful day. "Naruto, why do you no longer genuinely laugh when you smile? Why do you act like you're being courteous? Why?" Desperately, he wanted to ask, but he didn't speak aloud. Naruto was still a child, so discretion was crucial in this situation. Sarutobi's grief was exacerbated by the extreme formality of his newfound habit. "You called for me, Sandaime Sama?" "Yes, Naruto. You have become 13 today. I congratulate you on your birthday, and I have some good news to share," he said with emphasis. "Starting from today, you are eligible to take the Genin graduation test at the academy." With an unwavering smile at the prospect of an exam, Naruto said, "Yes, I know. I've been preparing for the last week. I have asked Iruka-sensei to conduct your test along with others your age." Hiruzen went on, "Since you've broken contact with them over the past 3 years, this will be a good opportunity to bond with the rest of your rookie group, your future teammates. Use this to create a good impression." "Yes, Sandaime Sama. I suggest you leave for the academy forthwith." The tests are starting in 20 minutes, so you have plenty of time. Yes. Excuse me, Naruto said, bowing deeply before silently leaving the room. The old Hokage's eyes shed a single tear. Please pardon me, Kushina and Minato, as I've failed once more. With a heart that had fallen during his brief encounter with the transformed Jinchuriki, Hiruzen removed the pile of reports from his desk even though he wasn't in the mood. For Yamanaka Ino, the day started off similarly to the one before it. She woke up, leapt from her bed, and punched her training dummy hard, in the groin. On the severely battered dummy was the face mask of Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke, how dare you? Since that freaking scene at the restaurant a month ago, this had been her go-to wake up routine. How could that stupid wide forehead bitch cheat on me? Oh no. Ino delivered a powerful roundhouse kick that knocked the dummy's head off. She was too furious to even mention the name of that whore. She took a few deep breaths to try to calm herself after vowing vengeance for the 30th time. Today, for some reason, it wasn't functioning. She was simply becoming more agitated, most likely as a result of last night's events. She had witnessed them making out in a remote location she had discovered close to Ichiraku's. You bastard, Sasuke. She had just woken up and thought, perhaps for the 1000th time. She entered the bathtub and sulked in the hot water without making a sound. If her ex-boyfriend had just ended their relationship amicably before dating the pink bitch, everything would have been okay, but it wasn't. On their 6-month anniversary, which she had painstakingly planned for the entire evening, he simply had to leave her. Furthermore, the manner in which he ended things was equally frustrating. They were enjoying their date when the foolish Pinky appeared, complete with a broad brow. After staring at her for a while, her boyfriend got up, said goodbye, went to the pink bitch's table, leaned down, and gave her a fucking kiss before Ino could ask him what was wrong, while they were on a date. Rain, thunder, and the sad sound of violin strings breaking. If that wasn't enough, he broke Ino's heart by leaving her in the restaurant with just a single word and leaving with the pink boyfriend. Stealer. I will never be able to forgive him for this. Ino discovered that she had unintentionally spilled chakra into the boiling water while she was furious. She quickly exited, dried off, and picked out the most sexy dress in her collection. Oh, it was a doozy, with well-placed cuts that left just enough skin hidden for the imagination while revealing just the right amount where it should be. You little shit, I'll prove it to you. I'll show you something that will never come again in a million years. At her feet, Ino intended to have Sasuke plead for her pity. She intended to return his manhood on a silver platter at the Genin graduation. Her father called out from the flower shop downstairs, Ino, get ready quick, you're going to be late, before she could get there. After hastily getting dressed, she made her way to the academy. You had better fucking look out for yourself, Sasuke. A good many had already entered the academy building. She noticed Nara Shikamaru lurking close to the wall, preoccupied only with his own pointless issues. Ino was at least 15 minutes ahead of schedule. The Pinky and Sasuke had not yet arrived. Oh, I will definitely get you, she pondered. The famous couple showed up hand in hand 5 minutes later. Sasuke was dressed in the cream shorts and blue sweater that Ino herself had chosen. Of all the nerds. The pink clung like a lizard to Sasuke's hand. No, Ino made herself mentally recite her name. Sakura. She recognized her enmity. I'll get you, too. I'll enlarge that forehead to the point where it can't be concealed by a scarf. A sudden pause in the conversation caught Ino's attention. Everyone's mouths were open as they stared at the door. She paused her anger toward Sasuke and turned to face the person at the door. Her entire world came to a halt. Naruto Uzumaki had just walked into the building. More thunder and rain. Naruto Uzumaki. 3 years had passed since she last saw him, since that October when he abruptly vanished on the 10th without providing the elders with an explanation. The Hokage himself had oddly cancelled searches, and the third had assured Naruto that he was in good hands. The blonde boy had simply been forgotten by the entire class, and life continued on. Nobody, especially the girls in the class, was ready for this at all because they hadn't seen or heard of him in 3 long years. Because she was too shy to approach anyone, Hyuga Hinata stayed in the corner and avoided attention. Every time she attempted to speak to someone, the other person became disinterested and fucked off due to the frequent interruptions of her own stuttering speech. I'm hoping Naruto-kun shows up. She had fallen in love with him ever since he had rescued her from those criminals that day. The inappropriateness of having a crush on someone at the age of 8 was somehow entirely disregarded by her deranged brain. Well, this small village was full of clichés. She never even had a casual conversation with him, instead admiring him from a distance. When the spell is broken, the enchanted two-horned unicorn will appear, granting wishes and spitting rainbows. Leaving my preteen fantasies behind, complete return to normalcy. The only person who had truly been saddened by Naruto's disappearance was the Hyuga clan's heiress. As the rest of Konoha celebrated the fox boy's acquittal, she had sobbed in private in her room, fervently hoping that he would be safe. She would grit her teeth whenever she heard them speak, open their mouths, and utter those words, or roll their tongues in their mouths to curse the boy. She would close her eyes, denying herself the obvious violation of the rule that people are incapable of experiencing such depressing levels of despair. Her heart naturally jumped with delight when she saw her beloved, and when she saw his new appearance, it jumped just high enough for a slam dunk. More rain, thunder, and a little violin symphony, please. Because the clumsy, unkempt boy from all those years ago was no longer the Jinchuriki. In fact, he was dressed very nicely. He was dressed in a black undershirt and perfectly fitted black jeans. The front of his orange jacket was unzipped, revealing a toned, defined torso. A silver chain was fastened around his neck. His blonde hair was the only aspect of his face that appeared disheveled. The teal eyes underneath were partially concealed by a spiky fringe, which he wore much longer now than before. The eyes, too. Good heavens. When Hinata saw his eyes, her heart also sank. It wasn't the point, even though they were that particular shade of cerulean that could only be used to color Uzumaki Naruto's eyes. The fact that they appeared to be sullen was what truly struck her and caused her heart to sink. He exuded a clean, self-assured aura and looked good aside from that. From the impolite, boisterous boy she had fallen in love with all those years ago, he had undergone a significant transformation. I own him. A rare turning point for the reluctant Hyuga heir. Regardless of the price. Uchiha Sasuke found himself in a terrible situation. He dumped Ino without a trace, and he didn't even know how to look in front of her. To my credit, he reasoned, she had been growing monotonous. The young Uchiha was willing to put up with much more than 6 months with the same girl. His ego was bolstered by Sakura's unwavering devotion to him, which was the only reason he had kept her around for a month. Additionally, though Sasuke would never acknowledge it, it was because of his older brother's abrupt coldness and distance from him. Itachi had appeared too busy to spend any more time with his younger brother after teaching Sasuke how to awaken his Sharingan. Since his lessons were too easy, Sasuke had been attempting to pass the time by hanging out with girlfriends, but after a few days, that too became incredibly dull. The dullness of the lessons, however, was not his fault. It seems that the instructors had determined that understanding the tangential component of velocity, the speed of a kunai flying at you, was far more crucial than understanding how to dodge the object. Furthermore, Sakura had recently become far too needy. In complete contrast to the brash Ino, she listened to everything Sasuke said without ever challenging him. Sasuke briefly wished that he was with Ino. Then his pragmatic side came out. Well, is there no turning back now? He gave Ino a look. She was looking at him with broadswords. Because I'm not a dagger. Or is it Jaeger? Hold on, it's SNK. Absolutely not a possibility. He let out a sigh, but his mood quickly improved when a third choice became apparent. Sasuke was frantically searching for a chance to approach his senior, the lively Tenten, who appeared to be available. Unfortunately for him, Sakura, with that sickly, cloying adoration in her eyes, followed him everywhere he went. When the fuck ni.san found the time to teach him genjutsu, he was certain he could use it to get rid of her, though he hadn't had a chance yet. He also saw the academy's conversation ebb and flow to quiet. He turned to face the door. He temporarily forgot his P.R. Eddie girl issues when he saw him there. Naruto Uzumaki had made up his mind to come back. Whoa, he's matured. Sasuke's bored mind enjoyed the idea of them sparring again because, after all, he was an elite Uchiha and would be far superior to the others in terms of sheer fighting prowess, while the other members, the Inuzuka, the Aburame, the Yamanaka, were not even close to being on par. The Hyuga was always there, of course, but he had never found the girl particularly noteworthy. He believed that the way the clan elders seemed to discuss their rivals who used dojutsu was overhyped. And after all of that, there was only one outcome and one conclusion. The only skills that have not yet been assessed are those of Uzumaki Naruto. Opeth's random death metal song is accompanied by thunder and heavy rain. Go ahead, faggot. The sound seemed to have been amplified by someone. Uchiha Sasuke sensed the unique buzzing that greeted Uzumaki Naruto as he entered. The blonde boy had definitely attracted the attention of almost every girl in the class, if not the boys, with his black jeans, black undershirt, and a haphazardly zipped up orange jacket that did little to conceal his surprisingly well-developed torso. The sight of the blonde had nearly caused some of the astonished Genins to start salivating. Remain in control, niggas. He watched the unexpected visitor. Naruto Uzumaki was turning away from him, probably to look at someone else. He could see the broad shoulders to which the neck was attached, as well as the spiky blonde hair that now reached the back of his neck. Sasuke made the decision to confront the new child, turning back to face Naruto and looking him in the eyes. The buzzing appeared to get louder. The newly arrived extremely attractive boy was staring at the well-known extremely attractive boy. It fulfilled every fangirl's fantasy. Dropping Sakura's tight hold, Sasuke moved forward, making sure his chest appeared as wide as possible. He smirked and extended his hand for the blonde to shake. He watched as Uzumaki Naruto's gaze followed his extended hand. The blonde boy's eyes seemed to hold a curious, almost indecisive uncertainty. Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto Uzumaki nodded. He spoke without offering a hand in return. I'm really sorry, but, are you gay? Nothing much really, but I'm pretty sure you were checking me out. The color of Sasuke's face began to rise. He spluttered. The remote seemed to have been swallowed by someone who had pressed the mute button. The nearly deafening silence was broken by the odd giggle. Yamanaka Ino attempted, but was unable, to contain her laughter. The Uzumaki's words even caused Sasuke to flush, as she could see. After all, he was the class hero, so it wasn't every day you saw the dick humiliated. Thus, Ino made an effort to savor the rare occasion as much as she could. Hey, at Haruno Sakura's outburst, many heads turned. Sasuke isn't gay. He's going out with me. Ino noticed Naruto turning, his eyes positively sparkling and a friendly smile spreading across his face. And you are? I'm Sakura. But how charming. I'll talk to you later then. Ino heard a number of people laugh this time as well. Again, given that Haruno Sakura was the smartest girl in the class and that the teachers were practically swooning over her, it wasn't often that she was dismissed. Although Sakura was undoubtedly intelligent, Ino had to concede that her forehead was incredibly large. According to Yamanaka Ino, those with broad foreheads didn't. As though someone had jammed the brakes and cut off the fuel supply, her train of thought screeched to a halt. You ask, why? Can I sit here? For Yamanaka Ino, a lovely symphony appeared to be playing in the background. Slow motion, she looked up. Uzumaki Naruto was there, requesting to sit next to her. Excuse me, but can I sit here? Now the piano solo began. After all, the world was a great place to live. Uzumaki Naruto, the epitome of gentlemanly charm, was there pleading with her for her forgiveness. As though someone had played Lamb of God during the quieter passages, the symphony abruptly stopped. Hold on, why was he pleading with her for forgiveness? Oh. Of course why you can. Her stomach appeared to flutter as a broad smile spread across his face. Experts concur that stomach fluttering is a common symptom of severe diarrhea, but romance novelists interpret it as a sign that the protagonist and the girl in question should marry and have 18 children. She moved to the side of her bench, allowing the boy to fall idly. When Ino caught a glimpse of the blonde, she couldn't help but exclaim, "You've changed." He turned to face her. Even though she could see some bangs reaching his eyebrows, he didn't appear rough or shaggy. Rather, it appeared perfectly appropriate, as though those bangs were meant to be in that exact spot. Well yeah, it's been 3 years after all. She partially heard what he said and nodded in a daze. She noticed that his face was nicely framed by the blonde hair on the sides of his neck. His neck was encircled by a tiny silver chain. Yeah, she replied, quickly rearranging her face to avoid appearing strange. Naruto abruptly turned around and appeared to be scanning his surroundings. The first bench on the far right was where they were. Ino paused as Naruto cheerfully greeted someone. Hey, all right there, Hinata. The class seemed to erupt in mutinous whispering once more. The first was that Uzumaki Naruto had sat next to Ino, and the second was that he appeared to know Hyuga Hinata, the shyest girl ever, by name. When Amino Uruka entered with the air of someone holding an atomic bomb, the whispering instantly stopped. The genin puts it to the test. On his way back to the Uchiha compound, Uchiha Itachi had a warm, welcoming look on his face. Several people paused as he was walking and smiled at him. The bright young Uchiha was obviously well liked by almost everyone, as evidenced by the fact that he nodded and occasionally returned smiles. A bright, sunny morning was approaching, perfect for a day away from the depressing Enbu atmosphere. Known for having a fearfully trained sense of movement, direction, thinking, and execution, Uchiha Itachi was one of the youngest members of his Enbu division. Furthermore, his Sharingan was regarded as one of the Uchiha clan's most advanced. It was well known that the Uchiha was a natural genius and a strong contender for the position of Hokage. In contrast to his Anbu attire, he was dressed casually in black, and his slender, wiry, yet strong physique was not overlooked. Gazing, gaping, and jealous glances as he went by were nothing new to him. With his hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, he walked slowly and deliberately, giving Uchiha Itachi much needed time to reflect. He had just escorted Naruto Uzumaki to school, usually without anyone's permission. After all, it was the Jinchuriki's first day of school, and even if the boy had been attacked less frequently, it was still safe to avoid taking any chances. As his thoughts turned to his relationship with the Uzumaki, Uchiha Itachi grinned. It was definitely not the brotherly kind of affection. It was intrigue at first. It had no alternative term. Uchiha Itachi took great pride in his ability to elicit strong emotions. Many people typically found it impossible to simply conceal their emotions, let alone manipulate them to some degree. However, it was practically instinctive for Itachi. Naturally, when he joined the Anbu, a world so different from the ones the pedestrians were familiar with, this proved to be a highly valued skill. Entering the Anbu would make it seem as though the organization itself had taken you in, embraced you, and sat you in its lap before revealing its most sinister secrets. The Anbu was that. In a world where secrets were as plentiful as the air you breathed and lies were as common as a stone on the road. Of course, the fact that violence was regarded as necessary as breathing also helped. The Anbu of the Leaf had a thick, twisted air that Itachi was familiar with. Occasionally, he would acknowledge to himself that it was undoubtedly fascinating. Well, but let's go back to Naruto Uzumaki. Uchiha Itachi was shocked to see that a boy about half his age was able to display the very emotional strength he took such pride in with such skill. He was aware of it. After all, he was the Sharingan genius, but his friend Uchiha Shisui was even more well known. And they had spoken for a long time. It was just a stranger meeting a boy every day for a while. Being aware of the boy's status, he would talk to him out of curiosity when he was just passing by. Then, gradually, Itachi would begin to anticipate the boy's meetings. Sometimes, he would be intrigued by his sardonic humor and the shocking contempt with which he would command his language. At first, hearing such contempt from a child was amusing, but Itachi soon found himself acknowledging what the boy was discussing without even realizing it. The contempt was understandable. Itachi believed that the boy was a phenomenon, at least in terms of his speech. He then took Shisui with him on one of their walks, and he had once introduced the boy to Shisui. Shisui warmed up to the boy inexplicably, just like him. On his days off, the three of them would occasionally talk for hours about anything. Itachi would describe how Konoha's ranking system operated and how the Kage would do everything in his power to keep the village safe. Occasionally, it would become instructive, with Shisui describing Nin, Gen, Du, Ken, Sen, and any other jutsu that was available, all theoretically, of course. As Shisui would describe how Byakugan users would deftly use chakra points to weaken their opponents, Itachi discovered the boy listening with rapt attention, eyes wide, mouth hanging open. Watching the young Uzumaki listen with an almost worshipful expression on his face would always make him smile and give him a weird, inexplicable feeling in the pit of his stomach, similar to what he had experienced when he had first seen Sasuke. It was not merely a theory of combat. Shisui would occasionally declare that learning about history was also crucial. Naturally, Naruto would moan because he somehow believed that history was a collection of outdated garbage with outdated activities. Less than a minute later, however, Shisui would have him listening intently to everything she said as she described Uchiha Madara's bloodlust and power. Lust, as well as how, despite Madara's unimaginable skill, he had suffered a terrible death at the hands of the Shodai. When he told Naruto about how the Naidame, Tobarama Senju, Sama, had declared war on Iwagakure after receiving a letter about how they had abducted his wife and preparing all the battlements, he would occasionally even have him rolling around in tears of laughter. However, he later realized that the letter had been a prank and that he was single. Furthermore, Itachi had to acknowledge that the boy's curiosity was admirable. He was aware that certain qualities should not be undervalued. A person would always get better as long as they were open to learning. Additionally, there was a desire to grow where there was a desire to learn. Naruto would convince them to show him what he had learned as he listened to the theory more and more. However, Shisui and Itachi would both draw a line here. This boy was the Konoha Jinchuriki, after all. He had been placed under strict supervision by the village council, and teaching the boy combat skills without permission would undoubtedly be frowned upon, if not subject to severe disciplinary action. Then something amazing had occurred. Their brief encounter had been discovered by one of their clan elders. He initially noticed the fear in Shisui's eyes. Their clan had been told not to communicate with the Jinchuriki. They ought to have just observed him as part of their police force, and now they were found out. The encounter had been peculiar. The hefty Uchiha Kirin gazed at the young boy, and Uzumaki Naruto returned the gaze, maintaining eye contact the entire time. When a few seconds had gone by, Naruto abruptly stood up after realizing he was seated in front of a clan head. "My apologies, Uchiha. Dono. I hope you will forgive me for my disrespect. I am Uzumaki Naruto." Itachi gazed at Uchiha Kirin with an expressionless face but a nervous heart. Additionally, Uchiha Kirin's eyes broke their typically lifeless expression for the first time in his life, and a tiny smile split his lips. "Pleased to meet you, Uzumaki-san. I see you are well acquainted with Itachi and Shisui. You must come to our compound for lunch sometime." Shisui and Itachi were left puzzled and bewildered as Uchiha Kirin hobbled away without even waiting for a response. There was no further discussion of the topic. Itachi was well aware that the proposed meal was an extension of the Uchiha's hand toward the lone Uzumaki, but Naruto never showed up. Shisui and Itachi themselves had discussed it, but there was no other reason why. For no apparent reason, the Uchiha had chosen to become friends with the Jinchuriki. Watching, the boy was suddenly over. It changed to escort. The Uchiha elders, fully capable of conducting an investigation, had realized the treatment the boy was receiving. And all of a sudden, safeguarding him from additional physical and psychological harm took precedence. Uzumaki Naruto, now full of self-assurance, had realized all of a sudden that he was getting respect, recognition, and most importantly, importance, but not love of any kind. Shisui and Itachi had made the decision to teach the boy the fundamentals of fighting. He was slow, clumsy, and ignorant, as one might expect. His willingness to learn, however, was what made teaching him enjoyable. He was prepared to change the fact that he was slow and awkward. The Uzumaki couldn't be seen teaching, which made it challenging. The lessons, of course, moved slowly. However, the two of them had come to the conclusion that body training was sufficient. If Naruto had the desire, he would learn about ninjutsu, chakra manipulation, and other similar skills. Consequently, Uzumaki Naruto gradually got better. Under their guidance, it was impossible to avoid doing so. According to the Uzumaki, Shisui was a superb slave driver, and Itachi had gained the nickname Captain Killjoy by occasionally demonstrating the disparity between his and Naruto's physical prowess. However, Itachi could tell that he was content after spending 3 years with the Uzumaki. Strangely enough, he had also been content. Being cooped up in Anbu, performing missions that required extraordinary skill, lying, stealing, and manipulating, and then just conversing with Naruto, was like a breath of fresh air. And now the genin tests were about to be administered to his protege. It was forbidden, as much as he and Shisui would have liked to see him there. He wanted to see how Sasuke did as well. He would tell himself that what he was doing to Sasuke was not neglect. After all, Sasuke was a Uchiha, and he had taught him the very subtleties of using dojutsu. To them, fighting and the desire to get better came naturally. Actually, he was most curious to see how Naruto would perform in a future battle against Sasuke. After all, Naruto had focused on his physicality, whereas Sasuke had been taught combat itself. "Hey!" He looked up, startled. He hadn't realized Shisui had crept up behind him because he had been so lost in his thoughts. Very careless of Uchiha Itachi, of course. He glanced up at Shisui Uchiha. Shisui was most likely a child legend or something if Itachi had been regarded as a child prodigy. Since few people had witnessed Uchiha Shisui's combat, there was nothing to say about it. After witnessing him carry out his move, Itachi would declare that he is a monstrosity. Because Uchiha Shisui seemed to have been created specifically for fighting. "Don't be stupid, Itachi, you know combat's my weak area. Now, genjutsu, that's my forte," Shisui would say after he had calmed down and laughed. At this point, you would sit down, take a few deep breaths, and attempt to understand the specific Uchiha skills. Shisui-san, the world is much darker than you realize. Lies and secrets, lies and secrets. Know what, Shisui-san? Shisui-san, are you interested in finding out? I am able to demonstrate. I don't intend to mislead anyone. His slender, lithe body was balanced precariously against a tree's bark, and his hair trembled a little in the wind. Telling Itachi not to speak in between, he had asked him to follow him. Upon arriving at their desired location, he crossed to lean against the bark and gave Itachi a direct look. "We need to talk. We need to talk about Uzumaki-san. Why? There's something wrong. Something, just the minutest of pieces is missing, Itachi. Do you think you're seeing the full picture? Do you believe you have a complete picture?" He kept a close eye on Uchiha Shisui. His graceful fingers brushed a mop of brown hair as he lay down beside Shisui on the plush grass. Despite the general slicked back hairstyle, one small bang appeared to object, lolling aimlessly in front of the wind. as Aizen Sasuke studied his fingernails, a perfect hand blotted out the sun. His lips pulled at the corners of a slow smile. Very impressive. That dude. Uchiha Sasuke became enraged after feeling embarrassed. The image of Uzumaki Naruto being roasted over a charcoal fire had taken the place of the rest of the world. The great prodigy. Playboy, the heart breaker and winner, the great dresser. How dare he call him gay? Before Naruto's currently ridiculous suggestion became terrifyingly real, Sasuke put an end to that line of thought. The class's overall decibel level dropped to 0 as Amino Iruka entered. The pony-tailed sensei grinned, and all eyes were on him. "Why so serious, son?" followed by the Joker's insane laughter reverberated in the background. The words, "Welcome to your genin tests," were there, confirming their worst suspicions. Contrary to what many in the group fervently hoped, the papers in Amino Iruka's hands were not naked sketches of Anko Sensei. Ever since they joined the academy, this bomb had been waiting to go off. Amino Iruka's arrival calmed Uchiha Sasuke, in contrast to his classmates who were more than slightly perverted and retarded. This was domestic territory. In every test, oral, practical, or written, no one had even approached the Uchiha Tensei. Of course, no one but Sakura. In a Kunai 2-dimensional motion test, she had even defeated the genius by 1 mark because he had not given the final question. What are the exact dimensions of a kunai? Enough thought, despite the fact that a kunai and a highly accurate measuring scale were on his table. Still, even that was no longer a cause for concern. Sakura had started purposefully giving incorrect answers since they had started dating in order to appease Sasuke's petty ego and allow him to maintain his lead. Because Sakura had responded with potato salad to the question, "What metal is a shuriken made of?" Sasuke had immediately noticed this. He did, however, have an ego issue, and he was willing to allow Sakura to attempt to win his approval. By doing this, the upcoming breakup would be guaranteed to be natural. With a shake of his head, the Uchiha prodigy erased the last traces of that bloodthirsty remark. He inhaled deeply while running a hand through his immaculately styled and shampooed hair. "I'll demonstrate to him how an insult is returned by Uchiha. You had better be careful, Uzumaki Naruto." After a nervous laugh, Amino Iruka's voice finally made it to Sasuke's cochlea as his anger subsided. "And last, no actual experiments of kunai throwing are allowed. You are supposed to calculate it by yourself," he said. He noticed the test paper when he glanced down at his desk. "Your time starts now." The author apologizes for the cliché, but the only sounds during the next hour and a half were the rustling of leaves outside the academy, soft whoops that indicated understanding a question, and moans that suggested otherwise, all of which were accompanied by Amino Iruka's rhythmic snoring. Inuzuka Kiba gazed anxiously at the query. It returned his gaze. He attempted to remove it from the paper by telekinesis. The paper was pushed off his desk by a gust of wind. He knelt to retrieve his sheet and cursed. That's when he came to that realization. The one amazing thought that said everything would be fine and that there were lots of puppies, love, and naked drawings of Anko Sensei in the world. Beside him, Haruno Sakura was working diligently, obligingly responding to her inquiries as if there were no tomorrow. It was this. Victory. Kiba began copying after he heard the mental exclamation. She was responding to question number 8, which was the same question he was answering, and the desks were reasonably close to one another. Kiba found it all too simple, and her handwriting was neat and readable from a distance. He copied, laughing. The trowel is the ancestor of the kunai. It is a very simple construction that can be used as a multi-purpose weapon by ninja. Kunai can be broadly divided into 2 categories. The shorter version, known as the sho kunai, is frequently used for staff ends or for throwing. The longer version, known as the dai kunai, is employed in direct combat. Kiba smiled as he completed his response. Sakura had already advanced to the following query. She had provided the ideal response to this query. In his eyes, he could already see Iruka Sensei awarding him full marks and even a smiley face for his flawless response. Sakura, meanwhile, had turned away after noticing the Inuzuka's covert attempts to imitate her. But Kiba didn't mind. This response was sufficient. With this, he would sail to victory. He swallowed and looked at the question he had just responded to. The idea of 3-man cells was first proposed by the Shodai Hokage. Give a true or false response. Kiba attempted to eradicate himself from the face of the planet using telekinesis. Uchiha Sasuke, meanwhile, was experiencing the agonizing equivalent of a supernova detonating in his brain. No, forget about that. He was experiencing the agonizing equivalent of conversing with Sakura. Why isn't he writing anything at all? He seemed to be overcome with frustration as he gazed at the blonde Jinchuriki. This was not the competition he had anticipated from the newcomer. Because Naruto had just spent the last hour and a half sleeping, just as well, actually. He calls me gay first, which was difficult, I guess. He then proceeds to do this. What does he hope to accomplish? From his mouth came a very soft snore that reverberated through the silence, resonating back over 4 benches. Sasuke was at his breaking point. He must have known. He just needed to understand Naruto's real motivations. One more snore. Fuck him. He was about to learn, of course. He simply left his test paper lying there. Ino examined her responses closely. The allotted 2 hours were nearly up. In fact, she had performed admirably. She had prepared extensively for this test, and if she had answered correctly on the majority of the doubtful questions, she might have even defeated the old forehead girl. She drew the last line, wiped the dust from her sheet, and leaned back, pleased with her work after taking one last look at her sheet. She was instantly drawn to Uzumaki Naruto. It was that he was sleeping, aside from the fact that he was seated beside her. For the sake of the land, I'm sleeping during the Genin graduation exam. She scowled and glanced around. They were all still writing. She straightened and jabbed the blonde boy on the side to make sure no one was watching. Naruto grunted and lifted his head, opening one eye. Done, she mouthed, frowning at him. He nodded and then fell back asleep in one of the most thorough and detailed responses ever. Yamanaka Ino sighed and turned to face the others. Sakura was silently reading from her answer sheet while holding it up. Beside her, Kiba was acting strangely. Before giving up and collapsing with a grunt, he appeared to flap his hands around the paper and make miming motions at it. On the other side, Shoji had managed to smuggle in a packet of crisps and was steadily munching away, splattering crumbs across his answer sheet. Shino sat up straight, folded his hands, and stared straight ahead. Even if Anko Sensei appeared naked and began singing Skrillex's most recent electro punk dance song, Ino was certain that the Aburame would always stay that way. Hinata, behind her, appeared to have finished as well, gazing off into space with a somewhat strange look on her face. A girl on the far left was frantically whispering to Shikamaru Nara, who was sound asleep. And then the brilliant Uchiha was sitting there. Hold on, what? Ino suppressed a guffaw with force. Because Sasuke appeared to have had his last bowel movement during the first Shinobi War. And that wasn't all. Additionally, he appeared to be looking directly at Naruto. So, was there any truth to what Naruto said? Was Sasuke gay? You used to go out with him. She was startled out of her reverie by the Uzumaki's voice. I thought you were sleeping. Yeah. Why? No, nothing. You were just staring at him. He's going out with, what was her name again? Ah, Sakura, right? Yeah. Naruto's face broke into a smile as Ino's response sounded more rigid than she had anticipated. Ino gave him a frustrated look. You're annoying. And you're... But a number of things happened quickly before Ino could hear exactly what she was. When a bell rang, Iruka Sensei jumped with sudden vigor. Groans seemed to reverberate throughout the classroom. Kiba appeared to scream in a high-pitched voice, and Shikamaru persisted in snoring. Additionally, Iruka Sensei had already collected all of the papers using a jutsu before the anxious students could finish their final responses. As her answer sheet flew in the direction of the Chunin, she pulled her hands back. The class let out a collective sigh. Sasuke Uchiha was furious. As his blank answer sheet flew in Iruka's direction, he finally realized what had happened. His mouth formed a savage snarl. I have to take the situation into account, but it's definitely not a magazine cover look. I see your actions there. You, Zu, Ma, Ki, Naruto. Now, Iruka's voice interrupted his tirade in his head. Who wants to discuss the answers? The sound of over 30 students attempting to push their way through one door in an attempt to flee brutal torture seemed to reverberate throughout the classroom. As she and Naruto left in a composed manner, Ino grinned at their teacher. After all that test tension, the refreshing breeze that blew through the academy courtyard felt very inviting. Then she began. There was Uchiha Itachi, awaiting a person. He still had that ominous appearance. Maybe he had heard about Ino's sincere wish to repeatedly acquaint her knee with Sasuke's crotch. Even worse, was his purpose in this place to neutralize her before she did it? Well, no. She gripped what she believed to be her ex-boyfriend's arm in a worried manner. Hey, isn't it a little early for that? Ino quickly withdrew, her face flushed, upon hearing the Jinchuriki's startled and somewhat arrogant tone. Keep the clichés coming, baby. It's not like that, okay? I just happened to trip, that's all. Naruto grinned, suggesting that Ino's earlier claim was as fictitious as a transgender potato. The author may also add that this isn't a fabrication. For information, see 10 things that constitute your wet dream. Fine, if that helps you sleep at night, Naruto. Turning around, the couple saw a smoldering Uchiha Sasuke. He appeared prepared to go on a psychotic tirade. Not to be confused with rapping by 50 Cent. Then he gasped for air, and there was an utterly unclimactic silence. How dare you do this to me? Another huge breath came next, and Ino yawned. This was becoming boring. I was watching you all the time. You wrote nothing. Freaking nothing. I kept thinking, why? Why would he do this? Then, at the end of the paper, it freaking hit me. You did that on purpose. You made me ignore my fucking paper. Now I didn't write a single fucking answer. I'm going to have to waste 2 more fucking writing the second test tomorrow. There, 2 hours of my life, wasted. At least, if the test wasn't so fucking retarded, I would have written it, but this? The Genin test? Damn you. One more breath. Uchiha Sasuke was startled to see the Jinchuriki's disinterested expression and understood that his tirade or rap had only been in his own imagination due to the vision of Naruto being roasted. See above. After taking another deep breath, he clenched his teeth and finally managed to utter a single sentence. Are you happy? Naruto's smile widened as he asked, that you checked me out for 2 hours straight, during a test? Certainly, my friend. You can tell me all about it. The earlier you come out of the closet, the better. Let's go, Ino. After that final broadside, the two of them turned, leaving Uchiha Sasuke's mangled remains on the courtyard floor, gasping for air and his face twisted in confusion and rage as he attempted to understand how the blonde had so thoroughly destroyed him. A warrior and a murderer. If there was a difference, where was it? A difficult question, but he was aware of the solution. A murderer felt guilty about what he had done. He experienced regret, remorse, and hurt. He would weep for his adversary. He would damn himself with a curse. The best killers, of course, would put these emotional outbursts off until after they have killed their enemies. However, a warrior did the same thing as a murderer, but a warrior reveled in the defeat of his adversary. He would join the others in celebrating the defeat of his adversary. He would be showered with accolades. He would receive praise for his exceptional bravery and expertise. Meanwhile, the murderer would cry for the enemy as well as for himself. He would then stand up, regain his balance, and cease his gasping. With determination igniting his demeanor, he would prepare his weapon, stand, and walk. After all, the next target needed to be taken out. In the meantime, the warrior would sleep, unaware of anything, drunk, his features adorned with a conceited smile, the ghost of a victorious laugh etched on his stupid face. And the warrior's throat would be slashed cleanly by the killer's blade in a single instant. Itachi Uchiha left the Hokage building. News of his most recent mission had just reached him. He had never done anything like that before. Because of certain circumstances, the Hokage had decided that Uchiha Itachi needed to become a Jonin sensei. But that was not why he was now making his way to the academy. After passing through the door, Itachi paused outside to take in the surroundings. It appeared that the test was over, and the students were leaving. He moved forward as soon as his keen eyes noticed the silver gleam of Naruto's chain in the crowd. To Naruto's surprise, his brother Sasuke appeared to have something to say. Then, had they already become friends? It was funny because he had never imagined Sasuke would be the kind to make friends with the lonely Jinchuriki. But he was pressed for time. Uchiha Itachi's presence became apparent as Naruto and the girl he was walking with passed Sasuke. Uzumaki Naruto. At the sound of his voice, every single head in the courtyard turned in wonder. The silence was broken by giggles and gasps. Yeah? What is it? Why are you here, Itachi? The quiet grew louder. Uzumaki Naruto, the unexpected participant, knew Uchiha Itachi by first name. We need to talk. It's about Shisui. The two of them were now being openly gawked at by the students. Did they mean the Shisui from Uchiha? The one with the crazy amounts of genjutsu skill? Did Naruto also know him? Okay. Let's go then. See you later, Ino-chan. Uchiha Itachi and Uzumaki Naruto calmly left behind a stunned Ino, an enraged Sasuke, and a startled group of students. As the wind ruffled the glass he was sleeping on and blew around his face, he grinned. The ends of his haori fluttered aimlessly, and his hands were resting idly at his sides. Indeed, Konohagakure was a pleasant place. The tall man lying down with no worries in the world went unnoticed. In other words, nobody could. Even though 3 years had gone by, 3 eventful years, the future would be even more thrilling than the past. Rewind. Hey, look who it is. Pointing to a young boy playing alone in the corner, one of the boys snickered. Oh, look who it, indeed, it's little Sasuke. The three tall, 15-year-old boys approached the smaller, gullible boy who was kneeling and working diligently on something. The boys glanced over and saw that the little boy had constructed a good sandcastle. With a finger to his lips, one of the boys signaled to the others to remain silent. He walked casually ahead of the young boy, turned, and kicked the boy's creation, the sandcastle, hard with sudden ferocity. The structure, which was made entirely of sand, fell apart, spraying the young boy's eyes with dirt. The older boys burst into howls and yells of laughter as the boy named Sasuke screamed in shock and agony. Unconcerned with the 10-year-old boy's suffering from a clod of earth being thrown into his eyes, the person who had kicked the sandcastle was on the ground, rolling around at Sasuke's reaction. So did the boy scream and get to his feet? No, has he summoned his parents? He was an orphan, so how could he have done that? Sasuke rubbed his eyes and pushed the sand from his brown hair before getting to his feet. The boys looked at him and ceased to laugh. He gave them a moment's attention. He pivoted. He took a few steps, sat down, and began building a second one by piling up sand. The voice of the big boy was surprisingly quiet, and he turned. Think, you're too clever, Sasuke. Think you're smart, building a sand castle when we kicked your first one down, huh? The young boy gave them a blank stare. What are you looking at us for, you little shit? Open your mouth. Answer US. Sasuke pivoted once more and began molding the sand. The largest boy, upset that Sasuke hadn't responded to them appropriately, jumped forward and cried out. However, Sasuke was prepared this time. He had just a second to turn and act, and he did. With terrifying precision, he clenched his small fist into a ball and struck the boy's groin. The boy who had attacked Sasuke shrieked in agony and fell to the ground. He retched, speechless. The other boys, who had been grinning as they watched, fell silent. They remained silent. One of the boys stepped forward, ignoring their fallen leader. Now that he had lost his courage, Sasuke retreated, attempting to flee, the poor boy's eyes showing fear. Before Sasuke could escape, one of the boys grabbed him. His hands were caught by the other. The third one's eyes met Sasuke's directly. You're finished, kid. Sasuke, the boy, let out a scream. Even from a distance, anyone could have heard it because it was so loud. And they did. They all did. Everyone was aware of Aizen Sasuke's yelling. They were unmoved, however. No longer yelling, Sasuke lay on the ground. His face was streaked with tears. His arms and legs were bruised, and his hair was disheveled. He thought he might have broken his left wrist. His body was in pain. The young boy was unable to pinpoint the area that hurt the most. He slithered ahead. Aizen Sasuke remained silent the entire time. Ignoring the stabbing feeling, he gritted his teeth and crawled forward. Sasuke was hungry, tired, and in pain when he passed out within a minute. He slowly opened his eyes. His wrist felt stiff, and that was the first thing he thought of. He cast his gaze downward. When his eyes finally focused, he saw that there was a bandage on his wrist. He raised his head. Two kids were watching him with interest. A girl and a boy, both of whom appeared to be his age. It was the girl who spoke first. Her hair curled just below her neck, and she wore pretty white robes. Her eyes, which were shockingly yellow, appeared to sparkle with joy. Ooh! You're awake at last. Fearing that the girl would attack him, Sasuke retreated and huddled into a ball. The boy scolded her, saying, Ichi-chan, you're frightening him. Be quiet. The girl approached Sasuke while kneeling in front of him. Don't be scared. We won't hurt you. Behind her, the boy gave him a firm nod. His eyes seemed to smile on their own, and his hair was sandy. Blonde. He had a cute baby-like appearance with a shock of hair that appeared to jut in between his eyebrows. What's your name? SS Sasuke. The girl appeared to laugh. As she did, her purple hair trembled. To her friend, she said, That's funny, are you two related? Don't be dumb, Ichi-chan. I'm not dumb, don't be mean. Sasuke gave them both a look. They stopped arguing when they noticed he was staring. Oh, the girl said, This boy here is Kazuki. He's my friend. See, Sasuke, Kazuki, I thought you might be related. And, she said, pausing to catch her breath, I'm Yoruichi. She finished, pointing at herself with a sense of importance. There appeared to be an awkward silence after that. Sasuke broke it at last. Thanks, he smiled and said. Sasuke Aizen smiled for the first time. It was also pleasant. Whoa. Watching Uzumaki Naruto depart with the Uchiha Itachi was Yamanaka Ino. Except for Sasuke, she had never seen anyone so similar to Itachi. As he jogged to keep up with the lightning fast Uchiha prodigy, she noticed the glint of his silver chain bobbing up and down. What's happening? She pondered. Is Naruto so significant that Itachi even questions him about specific topics? Or perhaps Itachi was making sure that Jinchuriki didn't say anything after Naruto simply heard something? Ino was certain of one thing, whatever it was, beyond what he chose to show the world, her new blonde boyfriend .be undoubtedly had a deeper and more profound personality. Well, I appreciate his secrecy. Sasuke, it's so much better than that silly show. Off. Sasuke was having the worst day of his life, to speak of it. His San first refuses to drop him off at the academy. Then Uzumaki Naruto, that jerk, shows up and questions his masculinity. Later, when he discovers the Jinchuriki's true intent, Naruto cuts off his manhood. To make matters worse, his San then shows up at the academy, only to depart with fucking Naruto Uzumaki. Sitting in quiet reflection, Sasuke planned retaliation against his now declared worst enemy, the worst enemy ever. The outer walls of Kongakure had just been touched by the fading sun. Hiruzen Sarutobi stared at it, taking in the abundance of crimson, vermilion, and scarlet that was strewn across the sky. Warm red tones gradually turned to a neutral purple, and then, as the sun's final arc sank below the horizon, the colors finally settled into a calm, cool blue, creating what appeared to be a painter's paradise. Unaware that he had been holding his breath for more than a minute, the Sandaime let out a sigh. The thought of what lay ahead sent a chill down his spine. There are so many options, so many lives, so many outcomes. He'd lived long enough to see when things were about to change. It left the past behind as it glided majestically in the blue twilight. As it landed, it erupted into flames on its own, destroying the present and causing brief mayhem. The present rose from its own ashes to become the future once all remnants of it had been erased and rendered unrecognizable. Hiruzen Sarutobi saw innumerable phoenixes fly toward his cherished village, and he knew that one of them would land here, igniting the chaos and signaling the imminence of Konohagakure's rebirth. I wonder which one it will be. He looked at the sun lowering. It was always his favorite. He stood there unsure of whether what he had done was right or wrong after all those years, all that conflict, all that bloodshed, and all that pointless fighting. Physically, he hadn't changed much over the years. Carelessly, the same sandy, blonde hair fell down. Naturally, he had now purchased a somewhat daring hat with stripes of green and white to match his kimono. He always appeared dark and sinister due to the hat's ability to cast a shadow on his cheeks. Yoruichi seemed to love the fact that his beard was always in a semi-existent state. At last, the sun had set. It had been 3 years since Sasuke had been permanently imprisoned and sentenced to 20,000 years in prison. Suffering was, of course, the main goal. The Shinigami intended for Aizen Sasuke to endure pain, to regret every last deed, to brood in self-pity and regret, and, ideally, to go insane during that period. Or was that the actual situation? I despise you, I hate you. Kazuki. Time to go. He was startled out of his reverie by her voice. That moment of uncertainty about whether Aizen Sasuke, who had previously been the defenseless youngster who would be thrashed without cause, had gotten away with it in what would surely be his most spectacular delusion to date, disappeared. And since we won't be doing this for quite some time to come. Before turning, Shiwan Yoruichi gave him a quick kiss. Time to go, and Urahara Kazuki's skepticism gave way as they both moved forward. Belief took its place. Yes, Aizen Sasuke had gotten away with it. This was the unchangeable reality. Only he and Shiwan Yoruichi, the girl who completed the trio formed when the three of them first met as children, were aware of this. Sasuke Aizen had gotten away. Urahara also knew where to go. The lights had switched on for the evening. To the dismay of their dates, a group of girls appeared out of nowhere in front of each store, and the typical conversation began. He grinned. He gave the cat a back rub and paused to give it a back-ear tickle. He flipped the page. The cat closed its eyes, laid its head on his lap, and purred. With a very strange laugh, he turned another page. Unusual, bizarre things were going to occur. After a year had gone by since he had received the mysterious message, he began to question whether he had consumed too much sake on Kurenai's birthday. However, as it happened, odd things did indeed occur. After all, Ibiki had once performed bringing sexy back, after Anko had given him some money. That was not the time for that, though. Yes, strange things were on the horizon. Ah, here at last. So this is Konohagakure? Screw me, we should have been here way long ago. This is awesome. Hitaki Kakashi gazed at both the blonde and the attractive, dark-haired woman beside him. The two individuals gazing at the well-known copy. Ninja Kakashi went unnoticed. In other words, nobody could. Kazuki gave Kakashi a smile. Gomane. But here we are. Silently, Hyuga Hinata moved through the brush. Her foot cracked a dried twig, and she flinched. They must have heard that. In silence, the dark-haired heiress awaited being found. Nobody discovered her. Itachi-san and Naruto-kun were apparently busy. Hinata stepped forward again, this time using her Byakugan and picking the quietest, most ideal route. The theme from Mission Impossible begins to play as Hinata pulls out her laser beam camera Devi. Hold on a minute. Fanfiction gone wrong. Hinata had been a little more anxious and clumsy than normal since the beginning of the Genin tests. Her heart had skipped a whole bar as soon as the blonde walked in. Sheet music joke, for the audience's musically uninformed segment. She saw that the seat directly next to her was vacant, and her face flushed. She wished Naruto had been seated directly beside her. Hey, mind if I sit here? It was this. She had the opportunity to say yes and then act out all of those hot lemon fanfiction scenarios that appeared to occur online. In any case, Hinata frequently questioned what the internet was and what a lemon fanfiction was. She had managed to blurt out, stuttering even her punctuation, yes, NN Naruto. K.kun. Backquote, before realizing he wasn't even there. Startled, she looked ahead, and received the life-altering shock. Ino was seated next to Naruto. He had not asked her, but Ino. She had experienced jealousy at the time, but she had somehow pushed it aside and passed the paper. After that, Naruto and Ino had both left the classroom. Although Hinata had remained resolute, that was a little discouraging. A strong resolve then emerged as he had followed the Uchiha genius outside. Her choice was made in an instant. No matter where he went, she would follow him. She would express her feelings to him. She would. The love of her life was already gone when she woke up from her fantasies. Embarrassed by her own distraction, she hurried to follow. She needed to see his destination. Socializing with anyone other than the Uchiha and the third Hokage was highly unusual for the Uchiha genius. She briefly closed her eyes. The Byakugan's vision briefly vanished into obscurity. She opened them once more and then gasped aloud. The fact that the gasp was audible was really irrelevant. They had vanished. The pleasant breeze caused his sandy, blonde hair to twitch momentarily. The afternoon sun glinted in the cat's bright yellow eyes. For a moment, his gray hair appeared to twitch against the grating wind. To scratch the cat on his shoulder, Hitaki Kakashi took a hand out of his pocket. Despite trying not to laugh at the obscene picture that accompanied the smut, he passed by, casually taking in the sights out of his peripheral vision. Ooh, look who's walkin' in. Where've ya been, ya, shit? Kakashi turned to face Anko. Oh, lounging about, as usual. My, quite the exciting life you lead. Anyway, they're already there. Ya better get your ass in quick, the old coot ain't in the greatest of moods. See you. As he went, Kakashi folded his book and tucked it securely in his pocket. It sounded like someone said, interesting. I've always enjoyed strong-willed women. The playful voice of the Shihuan princess, the second voice in Kakashi's mind, interrupted. Peeved. See who can be feisty. The majority of the time, there is no ink and only talk. Even as some office workers paused to gaze at the gifted nutcase who was now talking to himself, Kakashi rubbed his temple and muttered for the voices to stop. That's a crazy one. Night arrived sooner than anyone could have predicted. Even as nightfall drew near, Uzumaki Naruto was in a location he hadn't been to in a long time. Even though he could see the moon through the opening in the canopy, he could still hear the sound of the leaves whispering to the wind. Through the green cover, shafts of dull silver moonlight appeared, lending the area the ethereal quality Naruto was so accustomed to and cherished. The air was fresh, clean, and cool, a huge contrast to the village's typical flavorful air, which was brimming with vitality, zeal, optimism, and joy. His right hand was raised to his face. He was wearing a white hoodie when a drop of blood fell off the side of his palm. His hand appeared to be red in and of itself because the remaining blood had already dried. He believed he heard the man's whisper even as he brought the hand to his lips and his tongue briefly strayed out to lick the blood-soaked hand. Aren't you wondering if you made the right decision or not? Don't, kid. Remind yourself of your path. Recall what you know and what you have learned. Recall your pain, Naruto Uzumaki. The boy seemed to enjoy the metallic aftertaste, but a raw, vulgar smile seemed to play on his lips. The man was kneeling to ruffle his hair, and he could feel the soft texture of his haori. He could also hear the whispers and feel the long, elegant fingers moving his face in different directions, like a father checking to see if his son had bruises from the day's play. It was his first kill. He was so excited about it, How it pleased him to hear the mangled scream that escaped the half-dead man's throat, to see that expression of complete helplessness on his victim's face. It turned him on in wild, perverse ways, and he couldn't help it. With his hands clawing at the air, his kill had begged, futilely attempting to overwhelm him. And he had laughed the whole time, a rough, throaty laugh that had seemed a little inappropriate for a boy that age. The whispers abruptly ceased. That night, he was by himself. Uzumaki Naruto got to his feet and examined his blood-stained hand. The same emotionless face that preceded his character took the place of the smile. It was his first time. He needed much more if he was going to give them something to hate. The academy halls were filled with the usual chit-chat. Sasuke-kun, how was the test? As Haruno Sakura bounded towards the star student, who entered through the doorway looking like he had shit under his nose, many heads turned. As usual, she clung to him, attracting scornful looks from several of the girls. Ino appeared to have witnessed the birth of a horse. But for once, her glare was directed at the boy rather than the bimbo. That gay pink-haired, wide-foreheaded flat bitch is all he deserves. Gay. The blonde girl was reminded of the incident from the day before by that. After countless years, Uzumaki Naruto, of all people, had chosen to display his handsome but retarded face in the academy. He made the cliched but perfectly appropriate remark that Sasuke had crossed the fence to more lucrative opportunities. But she was appreciative. The push she needed to get over that jerk came from Naruto's little stunt. He was, of course, a Uchiha, that damned arrogant, judgmental clan with the Sharingan and their holier-than-thou mentality. Perhaps they were deserving of being removed. She strolled down the long hallway, a short distance from the blatantly ugly group of Sasuke fans, a small group of girls who were staring, drooling, and generally giving Sasuke's inflated ego the dreamy audience it usually needed. Conveniently forgetting that she had been the leader of that small group only days before, she gave them the same disgusting look. Ino felt a hand tap her left shoulder as the Genin Probables turned left into the classroom. She turned left and saw nobody, only the crowd of people entering the room. When she turned around, she saw Uzumaki Naruto to her right, who still had the fierce appearance from the previous week. Today, the disheveled hair appeared rather spiky. There was something almost too good about his face. On him, even the typically deal-breaking whiskers looked manly. Simply being close to him, breathing in his clean, fresh scent, and his breath. All she wanted to do was lean in closer, cup his face in her hands, and give him a kiss. She awoke to the realization that her face was as flushed as the roses she stocked on her counter. She glanced down quickly, and saw his ring. A cool, yet strange, radiance seemed to emanate from the silver circlet. Touching it seemed tempting but somehow prohibited. His necklace from the other day was missing. He looks incredibly cool wearing all silver jewelry. Ino dismissed the recent outpouring of love with a shake of her head. She took a step forward, determined to manage her emotions better. A second later, she slammed her head against the closed door, shattering that resolution. She screamed every profanity in the book as she jumped back and collapsed on her behind. Uruka. Sensei opened the door with a startled look on his face, interrupting her tirade. He obviously didn't think a 13-year-old would be able to speak such a language, much less use it to refer to an inanimate object. Then she shifted to abashment. In general, the suggestion to go shove wood somewhere was disagreeable and abhorrent. It was nearly scandalous to do this in front of a teacher. I'm so dead. My reputation is gone. You fuck up where the sun doesn't shine, I apologize? With a face that was half incredulous and half shocked, Amino Uruka opened the door. Yamanaka? Do you have anything to say? Uzumaki Naruto stood in the background, stifling his smile with ease, and had just opened his mouth to say, hello, when Ino approached and took in his newest accessory. Distracted, her forehead, the irony, collided with the door at high speed, causing the Yamanaka to use her most offensive words against everyone, even as Amino Uruka appeared placated. Yes, and Uzumaki-kun is also present. We'll begin in a few minutes, Naruto, so please come in. Oh, and Yamanaka. He could feel Ino flinching in extreme shame even as he entered. To his astonishment, Uruka Sensei's voice appeared to have changed, notably negatively, for Yamanaka Ino in the latter portion of his sentence. With a deep baritone of doom, he threatened, leaving the sentence unfinished for effect, if I hear those words being used in my corridors one more time. The sensei gave a stern nod, then leaned on the door to wait for a few more people to arrive. Ino covered her mouth and shook her head wildly. Great beginning to the big day, isn't it? Uzumaki Naruto, stop talking so fucking loud. Don't say a word or I'll explode. I'm tired of thinking about Sakura and her Moving slightly to the center to give the blonde-haired girl space, Naruto walked down the aisle and randomly selected a bench to sit on. Even as they sat, glances and whispers seemed to be flying back and forth. So, has the Uzumaki scored yet? If he is dating the Yamanaka girl, he's going to have a difficult time. In the background, there was a group of students whispering, which was hardly audible unless you were either A, one of the boys involved in the gossip, or B, Uzumaki Naruto. But Naruto decided to ignore it, bringing his palms casually in front of his face with a slight smile on his lips, and a drop of sweat fell from his palm. Ino and Naruto both turned. See Uzumaki. K-kun, may I sit here? The speed at which he blinked surprised me. Oh, of course. Nay, Hinata-chan, don't ask such questions. The murmurs only seemed to get louder. Perhaps they aren't dating after all if he's okay with Hyuga-san sitting next to him in that manner. He turned, going back to his neutral stance, but Uzumaki Naruto wasn't too worried, and he didn't need his peripheral vision to see that his friend with the blonde hair wasn't very happy with the arrangement. There are priorities, Ino-chan. I apologize. The students were violating what would normally be considered the first tenet of studenthood. Give your teacher your undivided attention when he speaks. The silence in classroom 9 on the academy's first floor had not been this strong since about the same time last year. All right. Now that we have all of your results, I have to admit that, despite the fact that you all passed somehow, some of you needed a little help along the way. Actually, quite the surprise. Even as Ino suppressed her laughter, he stopped to give Uchiha Sasuke an unmasked glare. Therefore, it gives me great pleasure to declare that your time in school is officially over. When wearing your headbands, each of you should be aware that you are entering a different world that is very similar to your quest to fill out your answer sheets, which attracted a number of skeptic looks. This is because, even though you can try your hardest to think of a solution to a problem in life, there is always a variable, an element of surprise, that could work for you or against you. This could be your evaluator's understanding and leniency or your comrade's kunai, which will deflect the final blow intended for you. Despite the fact that it sounds scary, life is out there. Lastly, even though it's crucial to be afraid and to be cautious when you're out in the world, I want to remind you that your primary responsibility is to enjoy your work. Even if your response to the Shodai's 3-man cell system is to classify kunai as weapons, you won't have to be afraid if you love what you do. With that, I'd like to start revealing the teams for the current Genin class. Team 6 will comprise of Kita Masaomi, Sanahara Anri and Ryugamin Mikado. The Hyuga heiress was nothing short of enamored. Ah, Hinata-chan, you never cease to amaze me with your confused mind. Naruto leaned back and watched calmly as Yamanaka Ino looked around excitedly next to him, and he felt the girl sitting on the other side physically staring at him. No prizes for guessing who it was, but another flame-edged glare of anger was beaming in from the other side of the crowded classroom. The humiliated Uchiha Sasuke, known as the unbeatable fighter, full-on playboy and killer of hearts, had been the subject of rumors ever since he joined the academy and had a devoted following that followed him everywhere. Only the most ardent Sasuke fans remained, but even they had begun to speculate about a potential pairing between the two class toppers after one exam with that asshole had changed everything. His abrupt new interests had caused his male fans to leave the crowd he typically had, and his female fans to drop out quite a bit as well. A murmur arose as the Sasuke hater camp and the Sasuke.is awesome and totally not gay maybe camp both whispered anxiously as he directed all of his hatred towards the blonde and saw his number one enemy turn his head slowly to face him. As their eyes met, there were physical sparks flashing between the two, a very tangible feeling that everyone in the class noticed. He cleared his throat. Amino Iruka, nobody cared. He sighed loudly. This was becoming more and more like that disastrous date with Kurenai-san. In hindsight, that was his fault, but this situation wasn't. Pay attention, he spoke a bit louder. Nobody cared. He was about to erupt into a tirade about how they were all worthless and that they would never pass the Chunin exam at this rate when he noticed what was actually happening. The two boys were looking into each other's eyes, and the entire class was staring at them when all of a sudden, sparks appeared in his vision. These were strong sparks of hatred, humiliation, and broken pride, which the slightly retarded sensei mistook for love. Wow, he thought, this probably doesn't change anything, aside from the dynamic of the next team. The next team, he said, and before he could say another word, the entire class, aside from Sasuke and Naruto, focused on him. For dramatic effect, he paused and said, Uchiha Sasuke. He was also being watched by the two lovers, Uzumaki Naruto. He had expected a lot of noise, But this was much more than the whispering he had anticipated. There was real conversation as everyone turned away from the Chunin once more and turned back to Sasuke and Naruto, with the black-haired boy returning to his slightly irate but excited gaze. With a slow turn of his head, Naruto gave Sasuke his happiest smile before winking and blowing a kiss directly at him. What? That public display of affection sent the entire class into a frenzy. I'll never understand why people abbreviate this to PDA. Iruka gave up trying to keep the chaos under control and just sat in his chair, muttering to himself about the strange decisions that today's youth made. Sasuke, Kun's girlfriend, Haruno Sakura, was furious. Naruto had no right whatsoever to do what he had just done. She was about to approach him, preparing to chop off his shriveled balls and toss them out of the window he was sitting next to, when she saw the very sad, almost depressed girl sitting next to him. Hinata appeared to be about to cry uncontrollably. Perhaps I'll postpone his rape until later. Though it took all of her willpower not to cry, Hinata lifted her head from her hands and turned to face the love of her life. Naruto was taking in the view, completely unaware of the chaos he had thrown the classroom into, and he watched as a blue jay landed on the branch nearest the window, slowly dropping the small, wriggling worms it had gathered into the snapping mouths of its young. Even from an angle almost directly behind the blonde boy, Hinata could see the glint of his right canine. A very strange smile that seemed to split his impassive countenance in two, as the poor creatures were gobbled up greedily. When the worm was in its final stages of death, Naruto lifted his hand to his bare teeth and noticed a tiny drop of water, sweat, or something else had formed on his ring. He quickly touched it with the tip of his tongue, but as soon as he did, the drop vanished, as if it had been entirely absorbed. He grinned for a moment more before returning to his uninterested, unadorned face. I won't think like that. Naruto-kun could never think like that. He's kind and cheerful and I love him. He just loves birds, that's all. He seems to be taking great pleasure in the situation the worms are in. I thought the heiress of the Byakugan, but she quickly dismissed the idea, reprimanding herself for even coming up with it. Hyuga Hinata. The class fell silent once more, and they turned to the Chunin, their bewildered faces conveying the same question. Why had Iruka Sensei brought her up? Team 7, Iruka sighed, preparing to discipline the upcoming group of would-be genins to the death. Team 7 will consist of Uchiha Sasuke, Uzumaki Naruto, and Hyuga Hinata. The next few minutes were filled with aggressive debate, insults, palming, and general chaos, and the entire school could hear it. The Hyuga appeared to have experienced a strong orgasm, and her eyes were full of unicorns, rainbows, and other girly things as she gazed at Naruto. Using spirit chakra to boost his voice, Iruka sounded a loud, almost deafening cry, silence. Before anyone had a chance to say another word, he announced the following two teams. Sakura gave him a disgusted look, but Iruka ignored it and said, Team 8 will consist of Haruno Sakura, Inuzuka Kiba, and Aburame Shino. Sakura was upset that he had paired her with the creepiest guys ever and had not paired her with Sasuke. I apologized to Sakura, but I really didn't want couples in the same cell. I had no idea that Naruto and Sasuke would be one. Hinata, from what I understand, is in a one-sided relationship, so I thought it was safe. In any case, genins should learn to deal with whatever shit is thrown at them. You have no choice, you spoiled little pricks. I don't care. Sasuke-kun. I'm never letting you go too far away from me. He went on to announce the next few teams, and Sakura, to be honest, didn't care anymore because she wasn't on her boyfriend's team anymore and his homosexual partner was there to apply a flamethrower to a fresh wound. She slid down in her table, tiredly waiting for the Jonin Sensei who was going to be their cell leader, but when Ino's name was mentioned, her ears perked up, but it was just some random team, with Shikamaru and Choji. Fuck this. Fuck Iruka Sensei and all his nonsense. Fuck the Jonin, whoever he is. And, Uzumaki Naruto, fuck you. I despise you. The whispers abruptly ceased, and he realized that he was alone that night. Uzumaki Naruto got to his feet, glancing at his blood-stained hand, and the smile vanished, to be replaced by the same expressionless face that preceded his character. It had been a young night. The man struggled and thrashed around, beating wildly on his captor's hand, his red eyes darting pleadingly over to the boy's companion as his palm clamped down ironically on his mouth. As emotionless as the darkness that was encroaching on the unfortunate victim that evening, Uchiha Itachi stood behind, kissed by shadows. Even as the victim's cries gradually subsided and his erratic thrashing was reduced to mere twitches, a tiny, sly smile danced on the boy's lips. The boy's eyes appeared to be wide, watching his victim with little more than mild curiosity. Even though the boy's lips remained stationary, The voice drifted past like the wind in the pitch black clearing that evening. I can demonstrate. I don't intend to mislead anyone. You see, in order for a crime to occur and for the offender to be judged by God, there must be a victim, a sacrifice, in order for the offender to be found guilty. Uzumaki Naruto's right hand slowly snaked up, towards his cheek, stroking it as a lover would, and the laugh seemed to ring in Uchiha Shisui's ears as fear closed in on him. He begged all his gods, begged for something, anything to set him free. Please, please, please. No assistance would come. He looked into the boy's hazel, brown eyes, which were so dead. For a brief moment, it was just the two of them, Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Shisui. Then it was gone, the fingers crawling up and clawing into his eyes in one smooth motion. Pain. Fuck fuck. God please. Oh please oh please oh please. Two fingers digging into his eyes. When the man's screams reached a crescendo and the boy pulled out his fingers after he had gotten what he wanted, he grinned, ah, a great symphony. But even as it reached the crescendo, Uchiha Shisui's pain reached a point where it was so intense that it could kill. In the past, Uchiha Shisui had taught Naruto everything he knew. At one point, their relationship resembled that of an older brother to his younger brother, Uzumaki Naruto. Or was it all merely in? When the windpipe burst, Uchiha Shisui's world came together in the height of agony and joy. Finally, relief. Death. Is Shisui dead? It was a warm summer evening, and the humidity was annoying, and that idiot Urahara was just not shutting the fuck up. He seemed to have a massive pretentious monologue prepared for every scenario in his life. Sarutobi Hiruzen was glaring daggers at Hitaki Kakashi, but the Jonin was not at all surprised and stood there waiting to be dismissed, boredly scratching the scalp behind his forehead protector. Urahara, are you going to shut your mouth for a moment? At least Yoruichi was on his side. Shisui's death was a revelation, but the geezer didn't need to make such a big deal out of it. Yeah, tell him that, and we'll see how he emasculates you, said both voices in his head at once. We're all damn pissed off now, y'all, little swizzle, shit. It wasn't that difficult. Kakashi just mimicked his expression when he had read about Igarashi Tora's death in Icha Icha Paradaisu, which always makes me sad and reflective. At least the Sandame appeared placated. Kakashi gave the most solemn expression he could manage. Wait. Make out paradise. Urahara was back. Yoruichi and Kakashi both sighed. We got him to stop talking for 15 seconds, and now that the sandy-haired pervert had this information, he wasn't going to let it go. You're fired. I need some time to consider what this means. Hitaki Kakashi bowed sharply and left the room, closing his ears in his mind as he did his best to block out the background laughter as the two fools read the chapters from his recollection of them. How they can do that is creepy. N K.Kun, Naruto. Even though it was just the first day of training, Hyuga Hinata was in heaven when she saw her Naruto.kun in that incredibly risque black, sleeveless undershirt, sweating a lot while fighting Itachi.Sanhan.to. Hand. She nearly orgasmed for the second time when he skillfully blocked Itachi's thrust with his elbow and delivered the final blow with a cocky, confident smile. To her right, Uchiha Sasuke was undoubtedly experiencing the exact opposite. She could see lines of fuming heat above his head as they watched the two spar, and the familiarity with which the two read each other's moves, as well as the extent to which the Uzumaki was above him in skill, had caused a direction in the normally self-assured Uchiha. It's time. The silver bracelet on his wrist gleamed in the mid-morning sunlight as Itachi called. It's a different article every time. Hinata had noticed the silver. Sasuke got to his feet as if someone had lit a fire beneath him, and without even asking the heiress if he could, he moved forward for his turn. She was so focused on her incredibly cool Naruto.kun that she didn't even notice him walking over her. He had been surprisingly forthcoming with her after she had followed him into the woods, explaining the covert training he and Itachi had conducted deep within the forest where no one would discover it. She had taken his responses at face value because that's what she did. Uselessly enable everyone around her. I hope you and Naruto.kun and Sasuke.kun get along well. Uchiha Itachi watched his younger brother come closer, embers smoldering in his eyes. He had never been so excited about anything, much less training, because his ability to absorb everything at once had given him a kind of detached behavior that Itachi had not had time to beat the shit out of him. He glanced at Naruto, and the perspiration-drenched Jinchuriki made eye contact and gave the smallest nod. The match started in an instant, and the younger of the two siblings started the most intense of offensives, mimicking the whirlwind swirling torrents with a spinning jump kick and a right palm jab. He kept himself spinning, lowering his center of gravity, and then he jumped and locked both of his knees straight before rising steadily with his fist already clenched. The elder brother blocked a kick with such force that Sasuke was sent back, stumbling, his eyes wide with shock. After the fight with Naruto, this fight felt meaningless and mundane. Itachi simply brushed away his advances with a callous, bemused smile on his face. If this was the best Sasuke could come up with, despite his great talent, then he might as well give up. But when Itachi noticed the deep smolder in his younger brother's eyes, one that indicated he was now serious, his thoughts strayed from the task at hand and started to delve into the dark, deep corners of his mind, pulling out happy memories. Doofus. Not that way. Really? You're the fool. Chan, you're also a fool. This is a kunai. The object in your hand is a shovel. Sheesh. Why won't you listen to me, Sasuke? You idiot, Chan. This isn't your fake kunai. This is the real one. As he recalled, he saw Naruto staring at him. He ducked under another weak, pointless blow and met Naruto's eyes. The Uzumaki nodded, barely noticeable to anyone but those who were accustomed to seeing it. Itachi's smile grew, now nearly severing his face, and he backed up a few paces, settling into a defensive stance, waiting for Sasuke to move. His eyes turned the usual deep crimson for the Sharingan, and then the dark shaped spots in the irises swirled, merged, and changed into a three-bladed side. Itachi watched his brother's eyes widen with shock, then completely die, as he unleashed his most fierce genjutsu on him. Itachi willed out as much chakra as was humanly possible as Sasuke moved steadily forward. Tsukuyomi. Black and orange. Oh, time. How slow it is. Its long, dangerous talons are digging straight into my throat as it claws at my soul. I'm at my breaking point. It's different. The pain, specifically. Now it resembles a sword more, as if it were being pulled from its sheath. Hold on a second. I am the sheath. Blood is dripping, oozing, and pouring into my soul's infinite hole. Why won't it stop? Why? As it slides out, slower than a glacier and more painful than a saw tearing my muscles, the steel feels cold, deadly cold. I feel like my hands are more than just stuck, unmovable and immobile. My body now has orifices that I did not have before, and blood flows steadily from them. More blood, or more accurately, the same blood keeps flowing. My brain is infested with this never-ending cycle. When is it going to end? When? The sound of glass breaking is somehow comforting and familiar. I feel the pieces dropping all around me, but it's ice instead of glass. I feel like my body is freezing. A blizzard will be approaching shortly. I'm done fighting. I'm at my breaking point. Will this ever come to an end? Will it? Hello. Hello. Hinamori. Sasuke sat up and screamed. He was unresponsive, his pupils dilated, his eyes bulging, his right hand clawing at his chest, tears in his sweater, deep, bleeding furrows showing through the torn fabric, and the depth of the nail marks indicated that he had almost torn his heart out. His knee. Chan held him by the shoulder and shook him, but his eyes were blurry with tears. He took a deep, trembling breath, his mind racing, completely empty. How did it happen? What on earth happened? He was about to fight Itachi 1 minute, and then he was lying here, bleeding from his own wounds, his mind racing, and the only reason he could think of was that his brother had done something to him, but he wasn't prepared to accept it, not now, not ever, not my knee. Chan, not him. Sasuke. This was Naruto's doing. Definitely. His mind broke out of its reverie when he heard that flaming, annoying voice again. His eyes refocused and he glared at the orange and black figure who was staring at him with obviously faked concern. A slight twitch of his lips, as if they were willingly being kept from curving into a smile, told him all he needed to know. In spite of the fact that the Sasuke hater camp loved to rumor about his natural fear and mistrust of women in general based on his treatment of them, hate was never a word that was ever connected to the Uchiha prodigy. His heart ached again, but this time it was for revenge. I despise you, Uzumaki Naruto. His thoughts were now deeply calm, with a sense of justified rationality that was unmistakable. I absolutely despise you. Everything was glowing in a kind of golden hue, glistening in the slanted rays of the late afternoon sun, casting shadows that blended and broke off one another like a spider's web, creating the ideal environment for some practice. This is just so freaking boring. Why does Dad want me to do this? Shikamaru scratched his head in frustration. His reluctant, lazy son came here, to the training grounds at this ungodly hour, to tune his ninjutsu at the specific request of Shikaku. He formed the seals, and a slightly darker shadow spread across the lazy, idyllic landscape. Sweating heavily, He controlled his shadows, performing the movement and stretching exercises his father had taught him a few weeks prior. Training this technique required an increase in duration and area covered, and it was a rapid drain on his chakra, similar to someone having just removed the plug in a smallish bathtub. Training is the most crucial aspect of self-improvement, particularly when it comes to our unique ninjutsu. His father's words resurfaced in his mind as vague memories. Smart work beats hard work any day of the year. The efficient use of chakra is far more important than the sheer volume you utilize. Do you have to use these dumb cliches, Dad? Shikamaru had sighed aloud. Unaware that someone was observing him with disinterested amusement, he went back to his training, playing with the blades of grass beneath his palms, quietly lying out on the grass, taking in the lovely evening. He casually picked up one blade and placed it between his lips, which even made him look rakish and jaunty. Without opening his eyes, he released the blade slowly from his mouth and said, "You know, people don't usually respect those with such relaxed, rural habits," grinning slightly as he continued to observe the young teen who had created the most beautiful lace-like pattern on the meadow. With a voice that was almost a whisper, he answered, "Very well, Naruto-kun. What would you prefer that I do? I guess it's definitely not possible to play the violin?" His azure eyes seemed to sparkle a little as the blonde-haired boy sat down beside him and looked out over the landscape. "I suggest you continue with whatever strikes your fancy," he said, maintaining the same courteous, casual tone. The boy was like an endless well into which he gathered all the negative emotions he could possibly fill: malice, hatred, jealousy, pride. Oh, he could fill everyone else's need and still not feel the difference. Aizen Sasuke didn't have his fill of enjoyment from this humorous little village yet. There was still a long way to go. Hatred was an addictive emotion. The more you immersed yourself in it, the more you start to crave. A fascinating case. It would take another 3 hours for them to start their next act of gaining all that desired hatred. Aizen's thoughts shifted from the present to the past, reviewing their highlights, as it were. Their masterpiece, he still believed, was how they had won the loyalty of the Uchiha genius. The mind rape they had accomplished at that time was something Aizen would remember for a very long time. They still had a lot of things to do, and Naruto-kun was likely the ideal tool for that. "I believe in the hatred they have for you, Naruto-kun, and I will not be let down again." The blade of grass drifted languidly onto the picturesque landscape after leaving the man's mouth. It was long overdue. Where on earth is he? The blonde was going to regret this, for sure. He was an hour and a half late. Kami. Sama only freaking knew why she was still there. Yamanaka Ino fidgeted with the hem of her skirt, trying to maintain a neutral expression. It took a tremendous effort not to lose her temper and storm away. He had specifically requested this from her, so why was he now absent? Oh, the nerve. She stared at that spot for a moment longer, a little alarmed, but nothing else happened. Perhaps it was all in her head. Beside her, there was a flash of movement, a sudden shadow that seemed to shift, apparently on its own. Shikamaru was capable, but when she told him about this, all he said was, "Boo. Freakin'." Who? She had been experiencing these incidents a lot lately, the feeling that someone was watching, following her everywhere she went, observing every minute of her day with stalker-like stealth, and she had started to look over her back more and more during the day. Even worse than her desire to tear that piece of shit apart was Choji's subsequent statement. "Doh." While he was eating those dumb potato chips, he managed to say, "Just ask your boyfriend Sasuke to protect you." It's safe to assume that Choji's favorite things that crunched that day weren't just those chips. In any case, the anxiety and fear were quickly returning. She rubbed both of her arms. The evening warmth had passed, and she was only wearing a tank top in the cold wind. That bitch had still not arrived. She decided to give it another minute. Then it was curtains, Naruto-kun. She detested her complete lack of self-respect, but there was nothing she could do about it. Naruto-kun was just someone she found very difficult to refuse. It wasn't like he asked her for things very often, so this must be significant. He was here at last. She turned and looked away, giving the Jinchuriki her most vile look. A glint caught her eye, and the moonlight caught the chain that hung down over the deep black undershirt, which shone bright silver, just as it did during the day. She continued to turn away from the blonde, putting on a fine farce of sulky ignorance, and as he drew closer, the presence abruptly disappeared, and she could feel the tension leave her body as her breathing became less nervous and her heart rate slowed. He was graceful enough to appear ashamed. "My apologies, Ino-chan," she said, feeling as though she had heard him say it before. "I was delayed by Sasuke-kun's rather sudden hospitalization, I'm afraid," he said after waiting for her to nod. Because the Yamanaka still cared a great deal about the welfare of her ex, significant other. Even though she didn't hate him that much, Ino's heart literally stopped beating. What happened? Naruto appeared sad but unflappable. He was now nothing more than a shoulder to weep on. It was an unanticipated training mishap. Sasuke made a mistake in his evasive maneuver during a sparring match with our Jonin Sensei. The kunoichi remained silent and simply held her breath, saying, "Please, let him be fine. His wounds are not very serious, but he was hit pretty close to his heart." In fact, Naruto had a somewhat dejected expression in his eyes. He is currently recuperating. It appears that there won't be any long-term harm. To be honest, based on his recent behavior, he had come across as a little distant, especially when she had seen him before the genin tests, when he had handed that arrogant son of a bitch his ass on a silver platter. In addition, Naruto always seemed to give no fucks during and after the examination, and he didn't expect any to be given about him either. Ino was surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Anyway, I am most certainly sorry to have kept you waiting like this, Ino-chan," Naruto said, with the dapper grace of a panther, as he fingered the chain around his neck and smiled as he met her eyes. The dull, opaque glint that Ino had seen during the genin tests was returning, though it was becoming less frequent. Occasionally, though, when he gazed into the distance, the sparkle of hope was still present in his eyes. Hope that something would change, that something would save him from the soulless abyss that his life had devolved into. With a twinge of regret, she wanted nothing more than to embrace him, and we're going to skip the hormonal blonde's wet dream because the producers are unhappy with the direction the story is going. Let's get to the good stuff. She tossed the previous 5 seconds of fantasy out of her head and shook her head. Ino-chan? She vaguely recalled that Naruto had asked her something while she was waiting for it. Huh. She couldn't remember the question and nodded her head like a stupid farm animal. "You never cease to amaze me, Ino-chan," Naruto said with a little laugh. He said the next line in a husky whisper, almost in an undertone, and his expression abruptly changed to one that was far more solemn. "You're as sly as a fox, Ino." The entrance was dimly lit, the flower shop was closed, the late evening had set in, a shutter closed somewhere, and Konoha was shutting down for the night, the only other sign of life being the blonde boy beside her. "Ino-chan, please," he begged. He had tears in his eyes and he didn't want to be alone, not on his birthday, of all days. She looked at him once more and felt sorry for him because of his sorry condition, which was marked by cuts and bruises all over his body. She had known the blonde for a long time, and he had always injured himself in some way. Her mother would only tell her, "He's just exceptionally clumsy." Her mother's call, louder this time, came as she stood there staring into his blue eyes. Naruto had started to sniffle softly. As long as she had known the blonde, he had never shed a tear, at least not in public. Unable to decide whether to ignore her mother and stay with him or go home and leave him here, she stood there until a rough hand grabbed her shoulder and dragged her into the front doorway. "Come on, Ino. It's already too late," she was convinced by her father's worried expression as he continued to stare at Naruto while adamantly removing her from him. She stared directly into the blonde boy's eyes as she fought to break free from the grip, and he looked away after a moment. She didn't see the first tear fall until the door had nearly closed in front of her. "Where would you like to have dinner, Ino-chan?" She was startled out of her reverie by Naruto's voice. She shook her head, attempting to concentrate. She muttered, "Ramen, I suppose. Yes. A bowl of ramen would be nice." She wondered what had happened as she followed the blonde to Ichiraku's and gazed at his back. Back then, did I know Naruto-kun? Did I really? The severed tree fell to the ground with a tremendous crash. Uchiha Sasuke also dropped to the grass, dropping his arm. He did not know how many hours it had been since his last meal. That is, he didn't give a damn. He was thinking of only one thing. Actually, just one person. And that particular jerk was going to suffer enough. Huffing like a panda in heat, he lay there. His bare upper body was covered in sweat. He had some rivulets of it that were almost soaking through his bandages. If he continued, the brine would directly penetrate the unhealed creases in his chest. If it did, it would eventually result in insane, mind-numbing torture. He didn't care, though. He inhaled deeply once more, causing his muscles to expel lactic acid through hyperventilation. He got to his feet and focused. It was no laughing matter to activate the Sharingan in such a severely weakened state as his. After a complete minute, his irises started to turn a drab red color, which was a reflection of the bloody past of the renowned clan that used dojutsu. Let's start at the top once more. Pretending that the trees were an army of shinobi, he resumed his movements and swept through the thick forest. His traitor of a knee-san had abandoned him for that blonde Nimrod, forcing him to turn to such solitary level training. Blonde. His punch, which was meant to tap the trunk lightly, went straight through, and that sent another surge of anger. The tree fell again, with a similar outcome. For a moment, he had witnessed his brother's Sharingan change. Sasuke had seen the 3 commas swirl into a scythe-like shape the second before he raped him. Given how ridiculous the accompanying chakra burst was, he had to know how. He had to put in even more effort to influence his brother now that he was aware of his allegiances. His spar had been a huge embarrassment. Despite his relentless efforts, he had failed to land a single hit. That was probably the last session he had for the day. He couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for his arch-enemy as he fell back onto the grass. After all, he had successfully defended himself against Uchiha Itachi. His mind started to wander and his thoughts became lazy. My. What do we have here? The anger had returned. He leapt to his feet more quickly than most people would have thought possible and looked around for the source of that voice. That voice was familiar to him. He was chilled by its surprisingly serene demeanor, which was all too similar to that of his adversary. In an attempt to glimpse the face behind the voice, the Uchiha prodigy whirled around on his toes. There was nothing but hollow, empty forest in front of him. As he ran through the whole forest, he heard the tiny crunching sounds of the leaves beneath his feet. He just had to know. His sense of calm started to fade as he looked wildly, which has been a very common occurrence for the stud boy in recent days. He struggled to catch his breath as he finally skidded to a stop beneath the leafy canopy of a clearing. Trying to push the fear from his mind, he gasped for air and clutched a low-hanging branch like debris in a vortex. He had never felt so lost, perplexed, and downright terrified as he did at that moment. He kept looking left and right in the hopes of catching a glimpse of the unidentified individual who was calling out to him. He suddenly realized that during his training, he had used up all of his chakra. The only option available was taijutsu. Come closer. He whirled his head around and jumped violently. It had come from behind him this time. Whoever it was, this person definitely wanted to mess with his head. He yelled, "Show yourself, you worthless piece of scum," directly at no one. He forced the activation of his Sharingan, willed out every last drop of chakra in his system. As long as he had that, he was unbeatable, no matter how bad things got. Nothing. Not even a little bit. He looked around, but the natural chakra sensing method he was using was doing absolutely nothing. Nevertheless, the unidentified voice continued to reverberate in his ears, taunting, provocating, and drawing him closer and closer. He gave a violent shake of his head with a sudden effort. He made himself stop thinking about these pointless diversions and returned to his training. He took his place again and started. His doubts kept bugging him as he worked up his 7th sweat of the day. He sensed the voice was absent from somewhere inside. It most likely had been a dream, a delusion his mind had created to force him to keep training. Just a delusions. He ignored it. It was justified to do anything to help him get back on his feet and resume training. He put the thing he hated in front of him and spun around on one leg while feigning to chop off the piece of shit's head. He hopped and skipped forward, testing out new attack combinations with greater speed and ferocity as he exited the movement more precisely than ever before. His sleep-deprived, overworked consciousness started to wane, bringing up the past like a slowly accumulating fog. Some memories came to mind without warning, while others did not. The flowers were on display. He remembered Sakura flowers. Fear gripped him as he held his mother's hand to cross the crowded street. What if he gave up? Then what? His small hands clung tenaciously to his mother's extended finger. No, that would never occur. His mom would not let him go. He was so happy that he couldn't stop staring out from behind her. He started today, after all, began his journey to become a shinobi. He remembered his excitement, his euphoria. His movements slowed to match his feelings, switching between motions with ease. Poetry in motion, that's what. They came shortly after. In actuality, the academy's gates had appeared considerably smaller. He heard footsteps behind him as his mother opened the gate. Out of the confusion, one child ran in their direction. As he ran to the open gate, his blonde hair gleamed in the sunlight, the extra water dripping out. He recalled how, seemingly in terror, his mother's hold tightened at that precise moment. He was not at all frightened by that sight, for some reason. Instead, it gave him a vision of the very freedom he so badly wanted. Freedom to exit the enclosure's walls. Freedom to run around the village and jump over buildings just like the adults. With a look of pure mischief on his face, the child abruptly turned to face the academy gate. He jumped, running toward it with a great head of steam. He swung around in midair, a toothy smile that seemed to split his face as he effortlessly vaulted the 6th Foot gate. As he watched the child, he was filled with wonder. Undoubtedly, he was a person his own age. Perhaps he was also on his way to the academy. They might have been classmates. He might be the child's friend. It was the height of his excitement. There was no better way to begin the day. His movement started to resemble a tornado rushing through the heart of the empty forest. As new concepts and patterns started to emerge in his mind, the Uchiha started to explore the depths of his unimaginable potential. With his Sharingan and the knowledge that his enemy's back was within striking distance, he was unbeatable now. Vomiting. The child ran on, into the academy's main doorway, and he remembered hearing a second shuffle of footsteps behind him. A man in the typical Konoha elite flak jacket also sprinted to the gate, yelling at the naughty brat who had slipped past his prying eyes. He shouted, "Wait, you little upstart! Wait, Naruto-kun!" Abruptly, his body erupted. In front of his eyes, his reality disintegrated like a poorly done painting. The scene that had concluded each of his 6 prior training sessions took its place. Black and orange. His body started to spiral out of control as he started hyperventilating once more. Before he knew it, he was lying down again on his back. As he pushed the last remnants of the mad hallucination from his mind, his heart pounded anguishingly inside his chest. Apparently as a result of his frequent panic attacks, another fallen tree stood or lay in front of his panting body. His normally flawlessly manicured fingernails had turned into a bloody mess. He had to physically dig through the tree trunk, clawing at it haphazardly until it finally crashed down because his chakra had run out halfway through his movements. Too exhausted to even attempt to clear the cloud that hung over his mind, he lay there. He was aware of what would occur. The cycle seemed to go on forever. It appeared that there was no escape. And all of a sudden it was there. The 8th one starts, he murmured to himself. "Come to me, Sasuke-kun, come, sunlight." Yamanaka Ino opened his eyes. Kami only knew that she had found a way back to her own bedroom. Her whole body felt a pleasant warmth from the early morning sun's slanting rays. But she could feel the cold iciness of doubt deep within. What did I do yesterday, for heaven's sake? Her head appeared confused, as if she had been struck with a baseball bat. This baseball, what on earth is it? She had frequently pondered. After stumbling to the wash basin, the blonde kunoichi splashed her face with cool water. A portion of the confusion surrounding the previous day's events started to clear up. She had gone to Ichiraku's for dinner after meeting Naruto-kun. Ino did everything she could to find out more information, but to no avail. "Ino," her mother's voice said, a mix of anxiety and concern. Reluctantly, she shuffled her feet, opened the door to her room, and started to descend. Similar to the day Iruka Sensei made her and Sasuke run 100 laps around the academy building for secretly kissing outside of class while he was teaching, she felt worn out. Yes, they had learned their lesson from that. Sasuke had not been pleased with it, but she no longer had a duty to care. After a slight stumble on the final step, she arrived at the dining room. Her dad was there, too. Being a genin might have given her a week off, but his work never stopped. He played a significant role in ensuring the safety of the village. He and the slothful Shikamaru's father formed a formidable barrier of defense that provided Konohagakure with complete protection. As his daughter walked in, he dropped the communique he was holding. Her mother insisted that meals were for the family. She sat down on the wooden chair and waited for her mother to pour the porridge for the morning. She scratched at her fingernails, frantically trying to recall what had transpired the night before. The atmosphere in the room, for some reason, did not fit the typical breakfast scene. Normally, Inoichi would have started to request his bento as soon as he finished his paper in the morning. There was no sense of hurry about his mother either. The two of them appeared to be much more relaxed than normal. She felt anxious because of the prevailing uneasiness. She dared to ask, "What happened, Dad?" The blonde knew from past experience that her father would not answer right away. He required some persuasion. She opened her mouth to ask again when he remained eerily silent, but then it finally occurred to her. The sunlight was angled incorrectly. It was closer to late afternoon than the time she usually woke up. She would be eating lunch late. In addition, her dad wasn't working today. He didn't miss a day. The safety of the village rested on his making that promise to himself. There must be a serious problem. From her seat, Ino watched in silence as her mother approached and touched her father's shoulders. Her eyes widened in terror, and she continued to stare into their downturned eyes, seeking explanations. She begged them, "What happened? Tell me." Her mother looked like she was about to cry. A lump formed in Ino's throat. "Did I do something wrong?" She pleaded with them in her mind to respond, to let her know what the fuck had happened. Something. Anything. Telling his wife, "I think it's time, dear," Inoichi said. Her mother wiped a tear from her eye and nodded. Ino was taken aback. In all her life, she had never experienced such disregard. She tried to check if it was a dream by pinching her arm in response to a whimsical thought. The piercing sting was sufficient evidence. She was real, even though her parents didn't act like that. Desperate to get their attention, she waved her arms. Her exclamations became more and more desperate. "Why can't you hear me? Why won't you? Mom, Dad," she cried. Suddenly, both of them looked at the clock. 3 had just been struck. Her father left the room, a short distance to the left of her position, acting as though Ino had never been there. Even the battle. Hardened veteran's right eye shed a single tear, which soaked into the tatami mat. Ino's thoughts were racing. She had absolutely no idea what was going on. Did she just disappear, or was she being ignored? Her frantic mind made the decision to make another attempt to make herself known. She screamed in her mother's face as she approached her. "Mom, can't you see me?" There was no indication that she had heard. Nothing, not even a look at her daughter. Ino physically blocked her path by spreading her arms as she was leaving slowly, not even trying to contain her tears. "I won't let you pass, Mom, I won't." Ino had also begun to cry, as if the anxiety and bewilderment had finally reached a breaking point and broke the imperceptible barrier. Her mother also avoided her and hurried out of the room from her left, her glistening eyes still fixed on the floor. The kunoichi were upset. She noticed a faint incense scent as she followed her mother out of the dining room. That was really strange. In a flower shop, incense was unnecessary. From the living room, it came. In her subconscious, something urged her to stop trying and instead look into this. After sliding the door back, she entered. It was frightening what she saw. It appeared as though the house's outline had been altered specifically for that purpose, creating a tiny alcove in the far corner. On what appeared to be a portion of the foyer mantelpiece, it held an extremely elaborate arrangement of fresh flowers. The incense stick hung above a picture frame that was nearly obscured by the flowers. She walked over and peered at the framed picture, dreading it even as she was doing it. Her sardonic mind would not believe it, even though she knew who it was. That was her picture. She recalled the picture. It had been taken only a week after she had turned into a genin. Ino recalled how proud she had been to bring back this particular photo from the developers, eager to show her mother how stunning she appeared in front of the lens. Definitely much better than old Pinky. However, her broad forehead did manage to shine beautifully in the flashlight. She was immediately brought back to reality by the severity of her situation. She thought back to her mother's teachings as she observed the flower arrangement, which featured a single chrysanthemum in the center. Up until the 5th year, there is 1 chrysanthemum for each year of remembrance. After that, there are 6 in total for each anniversary. Remember that, my love. One day, you'll be an excellent florist. At the end, Ino swallowed. It was a year after her death, and she knew it without even consulting the calendar on the wall next to it. She had already started to suspect that this so-called reality wasn't real. She had to acknowledge that the genjutsu she was under was extremely complex. However, she was already aware of the regular pattern of left and right parodies alternating. Additionally, the abrupt change from sitting in the chair to standing at the dining room doorway was a dead giveaway. The technique's utter weakness was demonstrated by the fact that both her father and mother had initially acknowledged her existence before abruptly ignoring her. It appeared as though the user had not even considered the illusion carefully, opting instead to improvise as it went along. It was now obvious that she was being tested. It was beyond question. Such retarded flaws would not be present in a real genjutsu cast with malicious intent. Not even in the event that the caster was a total jerk. Ino couldn't help but wonder what day this faggot had taken on for her as the illusion started to fade. The picture inside the frame looked recent, and her parents didn't appear to be much older than they are now, so it couldn't be too far into the future. As the wall vanished before her eyes, she glanced over and read it from the page. November 26th. Her heart leapt when she remembered that it would be 3 weeks later. She compelled her heart to slow and her eyes to close. She readied herself to leap out of whatever circumstance she found herself in and deliver a solid blow to her assailant, Tester. She woke up in her bed once more. She looked for additional irregularities as soon as her eyes opened, which could be the result of auxiliary genjutsu. She couldn't find any. It was the right time. The time was 7 o'clock. Using a method her father had taught her, she searched the entire room for the attacker's chakra residue, realizing that trying to find or identify the offender would be pointless. There were no indications or unique signatures regarding the use of chakras. In fact, her room was shockingly devoid of chakra. She must have had the entire dream by herself, but the issue was there. It couldn't have been a dream. The shrine in the alcove's design, the pinch, the details. It seemed as though something had enhanced her dream, giving her dozing brain the information it needed. However, Doing so would require a lot of chakra usage, which would leave a lot of residue. Her perception of the mantelpiece as the shrine supported the dream theory as well. The brain had no trouble reproducing the same design from memory. She was beginning to get an early morning migraine from all of this. Ino reclined on her bed and started to recall what had happened the day before, but she gave up when her headache intensified. That bastard will understand the genuine shame of pulling his own underwear over his head when I find out who did this to me. From below, her mother's voice said, Ino. Are you awake? In some way, it reflected the same feeling she had in her dream. She scrambled to her feet, shouted, yes in response, and ran down the steps. Even though she was aware that it had been a genjutsu, she was more motivated to speak to her parents normally than anything else. With a sudden feeling of deja vu, Ino was skidding to a stop in front of the dining room. The room had the same appearance. Her father was reading the same communique while her mother was preparing the same porridge. This time, however, the date on the cover was accurate. Why didn't I simply look at the paper's date? She scolded herself in her head for being such a fucking fool. After setting down the paper, her father turned to face her. He said, it's time, dear, to his spouse. The panic struck once more. Had she not escaped the delusion? Did it somehow restart? Not so soon after it had occurred. She didn't want to experience that again. She forced a tight throat to ask, Dad? It was a squeak of constipation. He turned to look at Ino. Relief flooded her body as she said, Ino, go get changed. It seemed as though a knife had been used to break the tension. She emptied her lungs with a deep exhale. Her mother had observed her response and asked, what's wrong, dear? She said, nothing, Mom. She turned back to face her father and waited for him to say something more. Her father's voice was serious as he said, anyway, go change. Her mother appeared quiet as well. Into what? She asked, curious about the situation. There was a wrong vibe to the entire atmosphere. After that amazing date with Naruto-kun, she didn't anticipate her morning beginning this way either. What? Wait. Enchanted. Her subconscious was filled with dim memories of the night before. There, beneath the raging surface, was the entire scene. Perhaps she could recall what had happened if she could just push the ripples away. Something somber. Black, preferably, her mother said, interrupting her reflection. We are going to a funeral, after all. At that, Ino's head whirled. She asked, staring at her mother with disbelief, whose funeral, Mom? It wasn't immediate family because there was no noticeable reaction. However, because attending the event was so important, the deceased was considered family or at the very least a close friend. With hesitation, her mother asked, you know your classmate Shikamaru? Ino gave a nod. It's his father. It stunned the blonde kunoichi. Every now and then, as Ino looked from her sad father to her upset mother, the wall clock's ticking broke the stillness. What the hell? He shifted. Nara Shikaku awoke so suddenly from his sleep that it took him some time to respond to his bladder's persistent cries. He walked to the bathroom, shaking his head in frustration at this interruption in the middle of the night. The Nara household had not yet adopted modern plumbing. He walked over to the outhouse, clutching his GI around himself. When he returned to the moonlit landscape after completing his ablutions, he saw precisely what he had anticipated. In front of him stood Uzumaki Naruto. His eyes were completely obscured by a shadow cast by the dim illumination. One of the moonbeams wandered over to his bare dog. That single tooth marred the picture of his most innocent smile. Instead, it enhanced it. Naruto wasn't the laid-back, dapper 13-year-old genin he frequently presented himself as tonight. He was the assassin tonight, hungry for human interaction. Shikaku had already thought of and ruled out every escape route in his analytical mind. This could not be avoided. Because this ruthless hunter had even defeated the formidable Shisui, the Uchiha prodigy, with his many talents and sheer strength. Not surprisingly, he was aware of the culprit. Although Shikaku and Inoichi never took credit for it, their defense and surveillance tactics were the village's real foundation. Flicking out, Naruto's tongue went over the jagged tooth, his grin got bigger. Suddenly, his victim sensed a second presence nearby. Shikaku saw a picture of an elderly man. His attire and face, in contrast to Naruto, were elegant, regal even. He pictured a single strand of the mastermind's brown hair teasingly hanging over his forehead as it moved in the stiff summer breeze. His killer's smile changed slightly, signaling that the moment had arrived. Shikamaru, be well. You have learned what is required from me. My son, make me proud. Naruto's hand made a swift motion, causing the silver band on his wrist to glint. The kunai's approach went unnoticed by Nara Shikaku. The renowned tactical genius crumpled on his back as the impact pushed his limp body backwards, wedged in his body before he knew it. As his head hit the floor, the weapon came loose, and a red film of blood started to appear on his face. Uzumaki Naruto kept his smile as he approached the corpse cautiously, as though anticipating a resurrection of some kind. He closed Shikaku's eyelids and slid them over glazed eyes while kneeling on the neatly mowed lawn. Right in the forehead, the tool had created a diamond-shaped hole. It had penetrated the skull and brain by at least 5 inches, based on the bloodstains on the blade. He raised the still-wet blade of the kunai over his mouth while holding it in his right hand. The weapon's pyramidal steel tip had developed a tantalizing drop of blood. He closed his eyes and stuck his tongue under the drop. It was no longer even an option to wait for it to fall on its own. Naruto Uzumaki persuaded it a bit. The handle is tapped lightly. The drop also released its grip on the icy steel and landed directly on his tongue. A voice called out from behind the blonde Jinchuriki, my. Aizen's melodic voice drifted to his eardrums, sounding as though it had come from all directions at once. You have made it into quite the ritual, I see, he said. Not even Naruto turned around those sniveling idiots, his lips simply curled into the same easy grin he always had on his face. It is very intriguing, this obsession of yours, Naruto-kun. Suddenly, the two were looking at each other. The body of Nara Shikaku was still there, the grass soaked with blood. And so is yours, Aizen-san, he said inwardly. Yours is, too. At the funeral, the atmosphere was just dead. Through his mask, Hitaki Kakashi picked his nose. Although it was a difficult task, what else could be done? He watched the general crowd from his lonesome position at the edge of the procession. Many had decided to attend this pitiful sham of a funeral, taking pointless time out of their already dull lives. No one was genuinely depressed or grieving. Only the deceased son and wife, who were visibly mortified. No matter how hard he tried to ignore her sobbing, it continued to reverberate in his mind. I wish this were over, or that I was the deceased one. As always, Yoruichi Shihuan interrupted, apologetic and eloquent. Oh, stop being a drama queen. Games were over for the day. Overtime as well. The 3 puzzled onlookers nodded their heads in agreement. The time has come for a conflict. There were no problems during the funeral procession. This is an absolutely useless ritual. He slipped a huge yawn as Uchiha Sasuke looked on. He had not had a good night's sleep in nearly 3 days. The frown on his mother's face conveyed her disapproval as she glared at him. The fact that he was exhausted and on the verge of fainting was not his fault. The voice, like some kind of extreme gay gigolo, was still calling him, desperate for him to come here. He couldn't focus on anything around him, and it was difficult enough to block out that thing. The ubiquitous Haruno Sakura clung to his arm. Perhaps it was not his tardiness but this needless show of affection that had drawn the disapproving gaze. Today she had become a bit more needy than normal. She struggled to decide whether to support her boyfriend or comfort her blonde childhood friend who was now her romantic rival over the death of a close family friend. Sasuke didn't have time for her nonsense today. Since the genin teams were divided, he had started to see her less, but that only made her more domineering and possessive during their brief time together. Her wide forehead had previously been barely bearable, but it was getting worse every minute and was equally annoying. Avoid doing this, he thought. It would not be good for the Uchiha genius to lose another girlfriend to his erratic outbursts and whims. Particularly in light of Ino-chan's situation. If this one didn't work, Sasuke was certain he didn't have a Sakura-style backup. The rituals were finished. After saying his final goodbyes, Sasuke left, completely bored. Now his whole body was numb with exhaustion, and the pink-haired deadweight on his left arm didn't even feel real. He had lost his enthusiasm from those previous dozen sessions. The world appeared dull and uninteresting. Because he could only accomplish what Naruto had done with a clear, calm mind, regardless of how hard he pushed himself. On this particular day, even the nearly fluorescent hue of his girlfriend's hair appeared rather depressing. Since he was the only person there who appeared to be deceased, the villagers attending the funeral did not mind his behavior. He heard a tiny, pleading voice behind him as he turned onto the main village boulevard with Sakura in tow. He turned to see Hyuga Hinata staring back at him with lavender eyes that glowed with concern. Now, what on earth does she want? Sasuke-kun, she said, as if her speech impediments were unique to the blonde idiot. Despite being on the same team, the 3 of them hardly ever, if ever, hung out together as a group. It was impossible to keep Sasuke and Naruto together without a furious, one-sided argument breaking out. Usually, it ended with Naruto sitting there composedly, ignoring the Uchiha's tirades, his silver necklace gleaming in whatever light was available. and that phony smile fixed on his face. Though their interpretations were very different, Hinata went on, "If you do not mind, could we have a word in private?" The prodigy and his pink-haired lover could tell the subject of the impending private word from the hint of red on her cheeks. "I don't want to bring up that idiot's issues again. I'm sorry, Hinata-san, but I'm going to stop caring about this." "Hold on. In front of me, asking my boyfriend to have a private conversation? How daring has this bitch become?" "Oh no, you can't," they both said at once, then exchanged glances, pleasantly taken aback by this unexpected agreement. The heiress wasn't done trying, though. Sasuke anticipated what would happen. When she decided to use her puppy-eye face, nobody could help but smile. The couple was no different. After 3 moments of intense gaze, Sakura shook her head and muttered to herself, "It must be about Naruto," before releasing Sasuke's arm. After saying, "I'll see you later then, Sasuke-kun," she walked haughtily off. With relief evident on their faces, the two genins watched her go. Sasuke returned his attention to the Hyuga, his gaze clearly displaying the question. "It's about the murder," Hinata said slowly as she peered around to make sure no one was listening. She didn't need to be concerned. There was nobody on the road. Sasuke's ears perked up immediately. This was fascinating. She wasn't complaining about her failed romantic life, at last. As Hinata stated, "I went there to Shikamaru-kun's place a few hours after the incident." Her expression was sincere and showed a mix of worry and excitement. "I searched for chakra residue in the garden with my Byakugan. I managed to see a faint trace of a foreign chakra which..." "Whoa lady. Give me a second." Now that he was fully focused on the heiress, Sasuke was unable to ignore it. "So, you went to the Nara compound, at night, sneaked around past the security to check out traces of chakra, all in order to investigate a murder." Unaware of his surprise, Hinata nodded. "What is the world coming to? Fuck me in the ass." Sasuke found it fascinating. He restrained himself by asking, "Did you recognize the traits of the chakra? Anyone we know?" His interruptions weren't helping the poor girl, who wasn't particularly forthcoming to begin with. "I could not place it, but I had seen this chakra somewhere before." Hinata paused. She blushed and stopped speaking. "It was a few days back, I think, when I was following," she said. "Whom are you following? Lady, spill it." Sasuke was getting close to losing it. His head was going to blow up if this Hyuga woman played with it any longer because it was already quite frayed. "Whom were you following?" "Let it be who I believe it to be, please," she blurted. N. Naruto-kun. Sasuke's eyes gleamed with fresh vitality. Hinata went on, "It's odd that nobody else in the village seems to be aware of this, but the Uchiha had already lost interest. There was no way to verify that it was indeed Naruto's chakra, and the evidence was at best circumstantial." Sasuke's eyes glinted maliciously, and Hinata saw it. "It wasn't Naruto-kun's chakra," she exclaimed, this time pronouncing his name correctly. Sasuke was abruptly pulled back to reality from his realm of fantastical retaliation fantasies. He met the heiress's eyes directly. She didn't appear to be lying. Furthermore, if the blonde had been the murderer, Hinata would not have gone up to Sasuke. Like a worthless, drug-addled idiot, she would have confronted Naruto directly and been brutally murdered in the process. "So you say," Sasuke said, not entirely convinced, but he decided to believe her for the time being. "Do you want to investigate this further?" he continued. Hinata gave a nod of agreement. For some reason, it no longer seemed disgusting to partner with this reluctant but determined girl. He almost enjoyed the chance to spend some time apart from Sakura. Sasuke concluded this brief exchange by turning away and taking slow, deliberate steps in the direction of Sakura's hiding place. "Well, let's discuss this when my girlfriend isn't glaring daggers at me from behind that corner over there. You faggot, just wait. You will regret the day you dared to blow that kiss at me because I will screw you over so badly." He turned to look at the Hyuga, who appeared confused once more now that her mission had been accomplished. "I honestly don't know how this girl will lead the Hyuga clan in her lifetime. Anyway, it might not even be dull to go on this brief recon mission with her. In any case, I'm not even fond of this broken girl. She's like a lost cat, desperate to be looked after," he said to reassure his ego. "I can smell it. Oh, Uzumaki, I sense it, your own little girlfriend will assist me in taking you down." There was a loud rustle of leaves. A powerful wind that had previously heralded significant beginnings and endings had started to blow. This squall wasn't your typical one. It was a prophecy, a famous foretelling. This wind started as suddenly as it ended, and it had no source. It seemed to have a will of its own, deciding to only show up in front of people it thought were deserving. The two revelers had not even lived long enough to merit such a grandiose heralding. They had done nothing at all to merit it. The majestic breeze continued to blow across their faces, playing with their clothes and stroking their hair. It might have happened because of the other things there, or it might not have. Hitaki Kakashi pulled his mask over his nose bridge and adjusted it. Even though his companion was grinning, his expression remained neutral. More than Kakashi's gray mop, the wind was ruffling Uzumaki Naruto's hair. The Jinchuriki was wearing his usual smile, with every pore brimming with insincerity. Subtext was flowing between them in a steady stream, and their eyes were fixed on each other. The blonde, choosing an arbitrary way out of the silent staring and mental chatter, said, "It's a pleasure." Like always, speaking first meant that Naruto had implicitly challenged Kakashi to respond, but there was really no need for such a superfluous sentence. Without a doubt, they both understood why they were here. The stalemate went on, and Naruto had fallen silent once more. Otherwise, what was the purpose of this meticulously orchestrated, stereotypical encounter? Something had to change. The breeze continued to rush past their faces with an unmatched fervor, as if it hadn't completed its intended purpose. Once more, the blonde took the initiative. He slightly altered his smile, but it wasn't very noticeable. It had a tremendous overall effect on his expression. It now appeared as warm and innocent as a newborn. He would likely be able to get away with using any of Ichiha's corny, twisted pick-up lines. That face is simply too up. Yuru. ICCHI. Son? Kazuki added. The Jonin let out an inward groan at the sound of that hellish voice. They were going to say something really cheesy, and he just wasn't in the frame of mind to take it well at the moment. Were you aware? Like my Zanpakuto, I also have 2 releases. The wind then vanished, most likely never to be seen again. Like a balloon popping, the scene's dramatic tension was broken. Kakashi broke out of his long facepalm and returned to his futile exchange of looks with the blonde. Naruto's smile had remained unwavering, to his credit. Even so, it nearly split his face in two, stretching the full width of his face. Reluctantly, like a cat approaching a hot milk saucer it had just been burned on, the intensity gradually returned. "I think we seem to be at a standstill," Kakashi said, rubbing his forehead. It was still awkward to say something just because it had to be said. The 3 other people in the conversation were starting to get tired of this constant cliché. Dropping. There was no doubt that they were alone in the forest, but somehow they weren't. "I suppose so, Kakashi-san," said the blonde in a tone devoid of feeling. The final sentence, which was obviously directed at the 2 figures that were gradually emerging behind the Jonin, read, "What now remains is to discuss what can be done here to resolve this rather unfortunate difference in opinion that we seem to have." The newly formed woman was breathtakingly gorgeous. Since he had never seen her in human form before, Kakashi himself did a complete double take when he saw her. Wearing very little clothing, he appeared to be having his eyes cruelly transformed. A cruel trick, to be sure. However, as soon as he saw her, the sudden enthusiasm had vanished. The adage that Kami-sama made everyone beautiful was well known. In Urahara's case, it was unquestionably untrue. The ugliness of the green-clad retard standing next to Yoruichi was a prime example of the true cruelty of a deity, if there were such a thing. Even Meidagai couldn't match the air of clumsiness and uncertainty he seemed to exude while sporting an obviously out-of-style green hat. No surprises there, thought Kakashi. After all, I suppose personalities do correspond with appearances. Naruto's soft, smooth voice nudged him. "Kakashi-san?" With a whip of his head, the Jonin resumed their confrontation. The blonde didn't seem to notice the 2 behind him, as if they were only visible to him. He gestured with his hand toward the general direction of the village behind him, laughing slightly to conceal his embarrassment. He looked directly into Naruto's eyes, looking for any kind of emotion, any emotion at all, and said, "I really do not care what your motives are. Seriously. The population of the village is your playground, so amuse yourself as you see fit." A quizzical eyebrow shot up Naruto's right. "Whatever do you mean by that, Kakashi-san?" The Jinchuriki's phony calm gave the smile a sudden, menacing edge, as if something were being restrained. Kakashi choked back a swallow. If he didn't manage the next few minutes carefully, this was going to get really messy. He quickly changed the subject. "I mean, your antics with Sasuke-kun have become the talk of the village lately," he said. Quite awkwardly, he concluded, "I mean, for you 2 to become lovers in such a short time frame is nothing short of fateful." Kakashi regretted his lack of self-control in such situations, as his words had come out of his mouth without any consideration. Kurenai-san had experienced the same thing the other day, when a casual remark about her pregnancy and something about her weight had triggered a furor. "She has a lot of feistiness." I understand Asuma's desire to hit that. Kakashi turned back to the present and saw that the 13-year-old's eyes had once more lost the deadly glint. He started, his tone neutral and calm. I see. He had returned it to the awkward area with a single sentence. Could you remind me as to what the purpose of this meeting is? Kakashi had started to question why he had come here in the first place and why he had pursued a confrontation like this at such an early stage of the game. Remember, we're just testing the waters. Yoruichi added something. To ascertain the true nature of the situation. In any case, you'd better quickly figure out a way to back off. Kazuki's voice was urgent. After this, things get worse for us the longer it takes. I wanted to congratulate you, Kakashi said, demonstrating his ability to think fast, for becoming a genin, and for receiving your first mission. The inquisitive gaze returned. Naruto voiced the flaws in that pitiful excuse, destroying it in a matter of seconds. I fail to see why you are the bearer of such news, and not my genin team leader or my teammates, he said. The Jonin lied through his teeth, trained to feel nothing. Itachi is busy with work, I'm afraid, he said. And therefore, the responsibility fell upon me to tell everyone in the team, including Sasuke.kun and Hinata.san. I think this is the most transparent bluff I've ever made, and that includes the time I was late for a meeting and told Hokage Sama that I had become lost on the road of life. The blonde seemed to believe him somehow. He could see it in the subtle shift in his face, the abrupt softening of the facial lines. Kakashi reluctantly nodded in agreement, saying, I appreciate your congrats and your thoughtfulness toward Itachi. Sensei. Maybe we can have dinner together sometime. You could treat me to a little ramen, maybe? The blonde Jinchuriki turned and left, saying, very well then. We shall bid adieu here and now. After standing for a minute and a half, the Jonin took a deep breath. That was quite a bit unnerving, then. What do you think? All up in his ass was Yoruichi. To come out guns blazing like you did is way too early. Sheesh. You guys and your naive brains. That last part was not even heard by Kakashi. Such women were also mentioned in the gospel text of Icha Icha Paradaisu. At one point, if the hero was not misinformed, a supporting character had yelled at him, beware of the so-called bitch, for these women shall cause your eventual downfall. Kakashi. San, you most definitely aren't. Urahara had also returned to her drawl. At this moment, Kakashi wanted to take a kunai to the forehead. At least I'll be responsible for it then, rather, undoing. And the rest of the forest appeared bleak. It appeared as though the animals had decided to protect themselves after sensing the impending danger. Uzumaki Naruto was strolling carelessly when he stepped on the buttress root of the biggest banyan he had ever seen. The system the tree had employed to secure its survival was so complex and vast that he was in awe. It is precisely because of these bindings that everything has fallen into this spiral. These roots will no longer exist. Everything will collapse and fall, giving way to the ultimate chaos into which it was destined to descend. Reaching that tipping point a moment earlier than usual couldn't hurt, could it? The good-looking man had returned. With his arms folded behind his head, Aizen Sasuke rested comfortably against the trunk of the large banyan, dressed in a simple kimono and haori arrangement that gave him the regal grace of an emperor. The disheveled brown hair fluttered in the wind as the person said, quite the intriguing conversation you had there, Naruto.kun. The blonde Jinchuriki held up his hand to his face and said, I agree. Kakashi.san had some fine points to make. He smiled as he cautiously licked the silver ring he wore on his middle finger, slowly extending his tongue out of his mouth. The Uchiha legend eventually emerged from the brush, saying, you may exit your hiding spot now, Itachi, sensei. Jet black and cerulean eyes met. The word, terminate, was uttered in a whispery undertone. The boy with the blonde hair shook his head. Let him be for now. He too, shall prove to be useful in his own little way. He let out a loud sigh as he looked at the man who was snoozing on the mossy forest floor. For now, let's just focus on doing what we're supposed to. Our genin team hasn't had any missions yet, correct? Itachi said, yes, Naruto.kun, with the same expressionless expression. With no particular focus, Naruto said, so I suggest we perform some of them. No, he has already started looking into the near future and incorporating these intriguing new factors into his overall plan. 2 at the entrance, 2 at the back gate, 3 on either side. The compound is square, Sasuke.kun. That's a bitch. Too bad security wasn't this tight before the Nara kicked the bucket. Sasuke.kun. The Hyuga gave him a stern look for his extremely impolite reference to Nara Shikaku, the victim. What, so you suddenly care about people after they're dead? You can't talk shit about them after they're gone? What about before? Didn't hear you saying Nara. Sama this, and Nara, Sama that. Hinata decided to say nothing. There was a bitter truth to the reasoning, despite its terrible flaws. They only showed genuine concern for people after they passed away, and sometimes not even then. It was getting dark. The background noise surrounding the Nara compound effectively drowned out the muffled sounds of the two genin. Tension was evident in the atmosphere. After all, getting caught would result in a great deal of unnecessary trouble, particularly for the young Uchiha and Hyuga clan heiress. In an attempt to defuse the situation, Sasuke asked, "You used the Byakugan just now, right?" They were kept waiting. The level of security was gradually decreasing. The current guard's shift would end during a certain window, and a fresh group would take their place. Easy access to the compound was guaranteed by this window. Yes. She turned her gaze to the moon. Sasuke glanced in her direction. She is considering him, he knew. Are you? You might be the one. He desired it to be. He wanted to see Uzumaki Naruto held accountable and punished, even though it was a perverse desire. A momentary sense of guilt. This girl is being used by me. However, she appeared to understand why he had accompanied her that evening. Interestingly, she also appeared to be interested in learning. 3 minutes. Sasuke glanced at her once more, reflecting on how different Hyuga Hinata had become from the blushing, stuttering version of herself in front of Naruto. She's been ruined by you. Now. With an uncommon assurance in their steps, they both moved at the same time. The guards who had completed their shift had indeed left, and there was no sign of the next shift. The girl whispered, "This way," and he followed. The moon was hidden behind the clouds, making it the perfect place for the two genin to sneak. Stop, Sasuke-kun. Here, this is where. You felt the chakra? Sasuke asked, letting his gaze wander. They were standing at the room's entrance. He was certain Hinata didn't want to go in, and he didn't want to go in either. When he heard her whisper, he turned. He could see that she was using her Byakugan, even in the dim light. She remained motionless, her body relaxed but strangely motionless. Clan Hyuga's Byakugan. Few things can claim to have escaped its scrutiny. It's there. It's still there, a faint trace of it, much lesser than last time. He remained silent. Rather, he shut his eyes, only background noise, wind, trees. This time, Sharingan was blazing as he opened them. The rush was always strong, and after it subsided, he could feel the Hyuga's hair move and her hand twitch, though it was only slight. There. Something, there, he gestured. Confused, Hinata walked in that direction. She did not appear to have received any feedback on this from her Byakugan. Her hands fumbled across the wooden floor as she reached down, until they found something cold, metallic. There's nothing here, Sasuke-kun. Are you sure? Huh? When he refocused, it vanished inexplicably. He couldn't even tell if it was chakra because it had been such a faint trace in the first place, but something. Right. Sorry there. Just a little jumpy. That's fine, Sasuke. Ku. Both of them had lowered their guard. It happened just as Sasuke was about to drop his own Kekkei Genkai after Hinata had dispelled her Byakugan. He took one step and came to rest at the door. What's going on here? Who are you? Guards, fucking shit. Sandwich. The Hyuga stepped aside, his eyes locked with the guards, and they moved with previously unheard of efficiency. The guard's mouth opened in surprise for a brief moment, but all he saw was the Sharingan. All was black, and he had seen nothing else, not even the shape or form of the intruder. Everything was black. Everything was blah. You dare step into the Nara's household, common guard? The guard knew he needed to leave immediately, but he was unable to see anything. It is I, Nara Shikaku. The guard's veins were now filled with fear, and he thrashed, trying to avoid the source of the noise at all costs. I'm S. Sorry, sir, I promise I'll never set foot in this house again, I'll nev. You have displeased me. Heal PP. Disregarding the situation, the man stood, bumped into the wall twice, eventually located the entrance on the third attempt, and left within 5 seconds to inform everyone about Nara Shikaku's ghost. According to what they were unable to say, a certain Hyuga and Uchiha were running in the meantime because they had nearly, almost, gotten into a metric fuck ton of trouble. Long before they came to a halt, panting, a considerable distance from the Nara compound. What? Genjutsu. Hinata, I used Genjutsu on Sasuke-kun. I know, what was I to do? We would have gotten caught. He thought there was a ghost? Sasuke nodded, at last getting better. Yeah, thought it was appropriate, you know. He was in the Nara household, and he could get haunted by the dead. He stared at her, convinced that she would punish him for taking such a chance. After all, it was a genjutsu on duty, guarding the house. But Sasuke was surprised when the Hyuga burst out laughing. She chuckled before erupting into a fit of laughter, which ultimately caused him to laugh as well. Both of them fell to the ground, still giggling over their recent deception of a guard into believing he was seeing a ghost from Nara, which had allowed them to avoid a severe punishment. For the first time that evening, Sasuke appeared to look at her clearly as he massaged his sides after he eventually recovered. "Hey, Hyuga." "What? Sasuke-kun. You're alright, you know, when you're not fawning over your NN Naruto. K. She also stood up and playfully aimed a punch at him. "Thank you, Sasuke-kun. You too. Well, see you tomorrow then." And, with a defeated look on his face, he turned to face her and said, "There's one thing. It couldn't have been him. Being there, at the place, convinced me of that. He couldn't have killed Nara Shikaku." "Thank you." Sasuke stepped to his left, toward the general area of the Uchiha enclosure. "Sure. Tomorrow, then. Aizen-san, you've always desired control, and you've achieved it. You never killed someone you didn't have to. Nevertheless, even though I am holding the anthill in my hand, I am unable to follow the ant's movements. Thank you, Sasuke-kun. You too, it couldn't have been him." Watching the Hyuga and Uchiha part ways, he grinned from his vantage point. Despite being a genius, Sasuke Uchiha occasionally appeared to make mistakes. For instance, only Uzumaki Naruto saw the glint his necklace created against the moonlight while it was around Hyuga Hinata's neck that evening. However, I can't say that I'm unhappy with the way things have turned out. Not at all able to say that.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.